30th, and we are going to begin with administrative business, the consent agenda. Would someone like to move it? Thank you, Stephen. Is that a second, Suzanne? Sure. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Natalia?
Yes.
Helen? Consent agenda?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
Mariah? All right, and oh, there you are.
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, we will now move then to the superintendent's report. Dr. Guillory.
Good evening, everyone. So great to have all of you with us tonight. We will jump right into our superintendent's update with some community highlights, superintendent school visits, important dates, and then our spotlight on excellence. The new Driscoll Building ribbon cutting ceremony will be held. The Brookline community is invited to the ribbon cutting ceremony of the new Driscoll School Monday, December 4th at 3 p.m. The event will include tours of the new building and I'm sure we'll get some more detailed updates on that. And we have quite a bit of Driscoll folks in the community, in the audience with us tonight. So I know they're appreciating their new space. So thank you again to the
4
Brookline
o'clock,
community.
Dr. Gilly, 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock for the actual program.
Yes.
The kindergarten information session for the upcoming school year for 24-25, the Office of Registration and Enrollment is holding a special virtual information session Thursday, December 14th at 7 p.m. for families planning to register their children for kindergarten in the 24-25 school year. This event is designed to help guide families through each step of the kindergarten enrollment process and answer questions. The Office of Registration and Enrollment is committed to ensuring that all families have a smooth and successful transition into their first day of kindergarten in Brookline. All families will have multiple opportunities to engage with our staff throughout the registration process and are happy to work to support each family with any specific needs that they may have. A separate session specifically designed for BEEP families will be held Thursday, December 7th at 7 p.m. And again, there's a flyer with all the details. You would learn about registration, school assignments, application timelines, as well as transition opportunities and more. And the session will also have interpreters present in the languages that are listed there on the slide. Our 8th to 9th grade transition, we have formed a working group to develop a process, process recommendations and revisions to the 9th grade course recommendation and selection process. Our goal is to make revisions that interrupt the existing biases in the system and make the experience work better for our students and families. In addition to the work of this group, the district is engaged in a longer process to address fundamental inequities in the transition process, so that every student can access the full opportunities that a BHS education offers. A virtual parent workshop. The Department of Guidance and Clinical Services has partnered with the Massachusetts Partnerships for Youth to hold a virtual parent workshop, Healthy Balance Screen Time, on Wednesday, December 6th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. This workshop is designed to provide guardians with the tools and the vocabulary needed to help children and adolescents make wise choices about balancing daily screen use while focusing more attention on exercise and nutrition. Pop-up restaurants at BHS. The PSB Food Services Department is excited to bring various pop-up restaurants to the BHS cafeteria as part of their I Love Local campaign. These pop-ups will take place periodically throughout the school year and will feature local vendors and culturally diverse cuisines. These meals will be free to all students as part of the National School Lunch Program and will be $6 for faculty and staff. The first pop-up was launched Monday, November 20th, and featured products from Boston Vegan, founded by Rachel Adams, a local business producing plant-based meal alternatives out of Newton. BHS Indoor Forum opening. Monday, December 27th, students, staff, and community members gathered in the BHS cafeteria to plant the first seeds in our new BHS farm. The goal of the interior BHS farm is to grow and produce a weekly harvest of hyper-local, nutrient-dense, organic leafy greens and herbs to be used in the school lunch program and salad bar. This also creates new hands-on service opportunities as we begin to recognize the impact that climate change is having on our students and the importance of offering opportunities to grow food sustainably. This collaborative initiative, sponsored by the BHS PTO, the National Education Association, and the PSB Food Services Department, is a core activity to build a culture of sustainability in our food system at BHS, from the seed back to the soil. The indoor grow racks are located in the BHS former restaurant, 108 across from the cafeteria, and creates an opportunity for true farm-to-table dining. And here are a few of the shots that were taken Monday night. We want to say a huge thank you again to Sasha Palmer. And I don't know that you can see it here in the center, but these are the names of the different fields Cypress, Winthrop, ACE, Scholars, Steps, and one of them is named in honor of Sasha Palmer. So she has her own field that's named in her honor. The fields are the different verticals of trays, yeah. The MIAA Cross Country Championship. Congratulations to the BHS Boys Cross Country team for winning the MIAA D1 Cross Country Championship for the second year in a row. Our medalists are Ben, 7th place, Kalis, 8th, Pablo, 9th, and Ultimo, 13th. So again, congratulations to the BHS Boys Cross Country team. The Massachusetts Music Educators Association Senior District Music Festival. Congratulations to the following BHS students who auditioned for and were accepted into the MMEA Senior District Music Festival. These students will participate in the Senior District Festival on January 5th and 6th, along with top high school music students from Eastern Massachusetts and special guest conductors. So we have Henry on trombone, Shanti on voice, Ingrid on voice, Ivy for voice, Ronnie on violin, Antonia voice, Sora clarinet, Ivan voice, Rebecca voice, Daphne voice, Diane cello. I'm competing with you, Helen. Koya saxophone, Lil voice, Anthony clarinet, Nush voice, Elsie voice, Sophia voice, Noah violin, Justina violin, Brianna viola, and Michael voice. So again, congratulations to all the high school students for this accomplishment. Our BHS Talent Show. The students of BHS will showcase their hidden talents at Revisions, the Student Talent Show on Saturday, December 2nd at Tappan Theater. And that's Saturday, December 2nd, show at 3 p.m. and at 7. The adult tickets are $10 and student tickets are $5. Superintendent school visits have been busy out in schools and look forward to sharing that time with school leaders as well as visiting classrooms. And so here you also notice that we've penciled in Roland Hayes, who will officially become Roland Hayes on January 1st, but we are in the process of making the change now so that it won't be so radical when we get to January 1. But we want to also thank the community of Brookline as well as town meeting for making that happen for this for the school community. Important dates coming up. We have December 6th as a K-12 early dismissal, December 22nd for dismissal for winter break, and then December 25th through January 1st is winter break and schools are closed. And with that, we will turn to the spotlight on excellence. One of the true highlights of the annual school committee calendar is the presentation of the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents Award for Academic Excellence to Brookline High School seniors who have distinguished themselves amongst their peers. We are honored this evening to welcome the 2023 awardees, Karen Nunez-Diaz, who goes by Sammy, and Nandita Rahman to our meeting. The Mass Excellence Awards are reserved for some of our most accomplished students who have demonstrated not just their academic potential and integrity, but who have also shown great determination, perseverance, and strength of character. These students truly represent the very best of Brookline High School. We are delighted that Sammy and Nandita are here with us in person this evening, joined by their families and support networks here in Town Hall, and by many others who are watching the live stream of the meeting. At this time, I would like to invite BHS Dean Summer Williams and BHS Guidance Counselor Nicole Bent to come to the podium to introduce us to each of our awardees and to help us learn what makes Sammy and Nandita so deserving of this prestigious honor.
Hold it just about like that.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I have to multitask and take some pictures, and our awardees are both wearing pink, not coordinated. We love that. We love that. Fantastic. Hi, everyone. My name is Summer L. Williams. She and her pronouns. Really proud to be here to honor our students, two of our top seniors. So we're going to start with Sammy. Sammy, why don't you stand up and have a little moment? I'm going to read something written on your behalf by Miss Ellen Hirsch, your guidance counselor and lovely support team. All right, you ready, Sammy and family? Yeah, all right, here we go. Sammy is an incredible young woman. She came to Brookline High School as a 10th grader from Honduras to live with her aunt and her cousins. Hey, cousins. While at BHS, Sammy has left an indelible mark with her resilience, unwavering determination, and infectious enthusiasm for learning. Sammy has taken advantage of the challenging courses at BHS. She's thrived and earned excellent grades, making strong connections with her teacher. Sammy's the type of student who wants to take every course possible because she's so eager to learn. She has complained that there's not enough blocks to take everything she wants to take at Brookline High School. One of the many areas she's interested in is linguistics. She exhibits a strong aptitude for learning languages and currently fluent in English and Spanish while actively pursuing fluency in French and self-taught Italian. Her abilities are even more impressive when one learns that she started in our English language learner program when she came to Brookline High School 2 years ago. Sammy has overcome significant educational challenges faced by her parents and guardian, emphasizing her determination to break the cycle and pursue higher education. Sammy has thrown herself into all aspects of BHS when she first arrived, even though she was still transitioning from Honduras, learning a new language, dealing with health issues, she jumped right in. First, she joined the cheer team and has been an integral part of it, easily earning the title of captain. She's also a natural leader, showcasing her ability to inspire and guide her peers in a collaborative team environment. And also over the last several years, Sammy has become more and more involved in the Latin Club, actively addressing issues affecting Latino society and supporting immigrants in learning English. Sammy has recently joined the African American Latino Scholars class. This was a class that Sammy could not fit into her schedule her first 2 years at BHS due to wanting to pursue other interests. However, she is thrilled to be a part of this group now. Besides academics and cheer and everything that Sammy is doing, she is very involved with her community by volunteering at Brookline Food Pantry regularly, as well as working. We're not sure where she finds the time to do all of this. And we're especially not sure how she manages it all in spite of her health issues. Sammy moved to Brookline, leaving her family of 6 behind in Honduras to receive treatments for a very rare autoimmune disease, scleroderma morphea. This condition calls for frequent doctor appointments and treatments. She's been diagnosed a few years before. She's received treatments in Honduras, but as time went on, she needed more medical assistance than was available in her home country. So Sammy and her parents made a very difficult decision for her to go and live with her beautiful extended family thousands of miles away to receive the necessary treatment from the medical community in Boston. Sammy has endured many side effects, such as nausea, dizziness, very little energy. When she first came to BHS, she was getting weekly infusions at the hospital. She was then able to give herself painful daily infusions and injections and currently takes multiple pills a day. She's drained emotionally, she's drained physically, and the fact that she cannot have her parents present to help her through this scary ordeal is extremely difficult. And unfortunately, stress can make her symptoms worse. And so she needs to be mindful of how much she takes on academically, and yet you just heard everything that Sammy continues to challenge herself to do. It is her perseverance to live her life to the fullest that is most to be admired. We at BHS have witnessed her remarkable growth, her resilience, and her dedication to her academics while she faces major health issues that impede her daily functioning. Her resilience is to be admired, and we are, as are her academic and personal qualities. Sammy, it's your determination that is so mind-blowing for all of us to see every day. There's no doubt that you will continue to conquer this world and have anything you want. And we can't wait to cheer you on and are so proud of you. Congratulations, Sammy. Congratulations. Can I get the two of you? Yeah. Yes. Yes. That's what we're talking about. Fantastic.
Maybe Linus, want to go with the family? With the family afterwards.
Always difficult to follow the drama teachers, so bear with me. My name is Nicole Bent, and I'm a guidance counselor at Brookline High School. I have known Nandita Raman since the beginning of her sophomore year and consider myself lucky to be a part of her world. She is smart, she is funny, she is kind, she is organized, she's tenacious, she's inspiring. She is the biggest Boston sports fan that I have ever met in my entire life. And she has a rare genetic disorder called infantile Pompe disease that I mentioned last because it is often the last thing I think of when I think of Nandita. The first thing I think of is what a rock star Nandita is in the classroom. She has a 4.0 GPA in a predominantly college preparatory curriculum at Brookline High School and will soon be inducted into the National Honor Society. A 4.0 GPA is remarkable under ordinary circumstances, but Nandita's is beyond remarkable because she's physically disabled, has limited vision, communicates aphonically, and attends classes remotely. Despite her extraordinary circumstances, Nandita always stays on top of her work, actively participates in her classes, and fosters meaningful relationships with her classmates and teachers. Teachers love Nandita. Her true life story teacher raves. Nandita is a wonderful student and delightful presence in class. She works hard, pays attention, participates regularly, and most importantly, really seems to enjoy herself. We are delighted she is in our class and look forward to her continuing to shine and grow. Her foundations of calculus teacher shares, Nandita, you are doing a fantastic job in class. Current average, 100%. And her English 3 teacher adds, Nandita completes all of her assignments in a timely fashion with thoughtfulness and originality. She contributes regularly to class discussions. Keep it up. Nandita always keeps it up. In fact, I don't think she would know how to quit. Just to put things in perspective, the life expectancy for infantile Pompe is 2 years. So Nandita knows what a gift each day is. She lives her life that way. Even attending Brookline High School has been a gift. one that Nandita had to fight for. During COVID, it became apparent that remote learning was the perfect antidote for Nandita's obstacles to attending a large public high school, which includes her ventilator, wheelchair, and complex medical issues. When we returned to school in person in the fall of 2021, it looked as though Nandita would not be able to continue learning remotely, despite the fact that this mode of instruction seemed custom made for her. So she fought for her right to attend virtually and won. A victory for her and every other student like her. Although arguably no one is quite like Nandita. We meet often over Zoom, and it's typically the highlight of my week. She is one of the happiest people I know, and talking to her always puts everything in perspective. We've learned through the years to put a limit on our sports talk, although celebrating a Patriots win with her is the best. She is unfailingly positive, even having faith in the Patriots this season. For those of you non-sports fans out there, the Pats are 2-9 right now. Her optimism is a model to us all and undoubtedly the secret to her success. Nandita plans to teach 4th grade, and knowing her, it is only a matter of time. She is a wonderful combination of warmth and sensibility that would make her a natural. I would consider myself lucky if my kids were to have a teacher like Nandita. I cannot believe that Nandita will graduate in 6 short months. And while I'm incredibly sad to see her go and incredibly jealous of whoever gets to work with her next year, I take solace in knowing that she will eventually be a gift to the world of education. Thank you.
Some remarks, yes? Great. Do you want me to? Okay, great. A picture together, okay? Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do the remarks now? Thank you. Yeah, why don't we do the remarks now? And then we'll do a picture of it.
Thank you so much. I'll pass this to you.
Can you see okay? Good evening, everyone. I am super excited to be here to receive this award. A quick sentence about me. I am an aphonic communicator. I can speak like all of you, but you cannot hear my voice due to muscle weakness from a rare disease. My nurse, Haley, will be phonating my speech today. I want to thank Superintendent Guillory for the honor. I was totally surprised when I got the call from Dean Williams and Miss Bent to hear that I was receiving this award. Brookline Schools means the world to me. When I was 3 years old, Miss Vicky Milstein interviewed me for the BEEP program in the UA building. At the end of the interview, she stood up and said, "We will educate this little girl." I started in the BEEP program and then attended Driscoll School until 8th grade. I had an amazing experience at Driscoll, largely due to all my amazing teachers there. I would like to thank many of those teachers who are here today. Mr. Barry Rosenweiser, Miss Sullivan, Miss Mackey, Miss Hawkins, Miss Hart, Miss Rossi, Mr. Auger, Miss Reed, Miss Plord, and Mr. Euclid. I would also like to thank many amazing teachers who are not here today, including Miss Pelletier, Miss Warfield, Wong Lashore, and Wu Lashore. I would especially like to thank Mr. Coco, who is one of the reasons I love math so much. Thank you, Driscoll School. I was fortunate to be taught by many amazing teachers at the high school as well. Thank you, Miss Bent, Miss Bader, Miss Cruz, Miss Rabina, for being such amazing educators and also for making the time to come here today. I would like to especially thank Mr. Marr, who is also here today, who, apart from being an amazing history teacher, also makes time every week to discuss Boston sports with me. Given that I am crazy cakes about our local professional teams and follow them all closely. Thanks also to many other amazing teachers who are not here today, including Miss Lamb, Miss Hemphill, Mr. Barrett, Mr. Barquette, and Dr. Driscoll. The nurses and paras also played a crucial role in my education. Special thanks to the artist nurse Lena and Nurse Diane, my fun school nurse for many years. Thank you, Nurses Donnelly, Dewing, and Layham. You all believed in me and supported my love for learning and never gave up on me. Thank you for making learning fun and for helping me succeed and supporting me whenever I had challenges over the years, and for making the time to come here to watch me get my award.
We're going to have a quick thank you from Sammy.
Hello, everyone. I am Sammy, and I am truly grateful to be here today. It's an amazing opportunity. I want to thank the superintendent, all my teachers, my family. It's been a hard journey, but not impossible. And having all of you around made it a better, unforgettable experience. I just want to tell everyone that we are capable of anything we said in our lives. I just want to tell everyone that no matter where you are at, no matter the challenges that life gives you, the only limit in life is you. I want to keep inspiring the world and all students to never give up, to keep trying, because life, it's a journey, not a destination. Thank you.
Everybody get those phones out? Yeah. Ready to go? One, two, and many threes, I'm sure. Everybody just start snapping. Yay, congratulations! Thank you. Thank you. All right, and now thank you. You were here for the ceremony. Now's a great time to.
Congratulations again to Sammy and Nandita. You are both very inspirational to us all, and for the adversity that you've been able to overcome. It's very impressive indeed. So thank you. Now, all of you are certainly welcome to stay for our next several agenda items, although certainly we understand if you want to call it a night and celebrate your very well-earned achievements. Now, Mariah, you had a question regarding the superintendent's report?
Do you feel like I need to help get people out? Okay, all right. Okay, all right.
Very inspirational.
It's very difficult to follow that incredible segment, but we will try our best to move on. Mariah, you have a question regarding the superintendent's report?
I did. I just had a question, Linus, on the kindergarten registration info sessions. This was something okay. Yeah. Very kind. For the kindergarten info sessions, is it possible to make sure that the discussion of signing up for extended day is part of that? Because I think a lot of families don't realize that they have to sign up for extended day even before, especially if they're in a buffer placement, they should be signing up for both of them. And I know that that's something that used to be a little bit more hand in glove. And I think it would be great if we could make sure also if at those sessions and then also when people start signing up, like whenever registration really opens too. That would be wonderful.
All right.
Thank
Yep,
you.
We'll pass that along.
Thank you so much. I'll follow up with Megan too. I had mentioned something a while ago, but
Okay.
that just reminded me again. It's an opportunity. If you're signing up for kindergarten registration, also go look at the extended days. I'll just say that now. Make sure you sign up in time.
Stephen, did you say you had a question as well? No? Okay. Anybody else? Anyone online? All right.
That's it.
Okay, so that includes the superintendent's report. We will now move on to public comment. And just as a reminder, speakers are going to be timed at 3 minutes. All right, so our first speaker is Ms. Noor Abdallah.
And if you don't want to bend, you can feel free to lift it. Okay, a few inches away. All right.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noor Abdallah, and I'm an Palestinian American resident of Brookline Precinct 15. I am here today to ask for your compassion and understanding that the American Muslims are experiencing numerous instances of Islamophobia. There has been unchecked, flagrant anti-Muslim and anti-Arab hate speech that has resulted in severe outcomes at this time. The latest of the unprovoked, brutal shooting of 3 Palestinian college students in New England. One of them may never walk again after a bullet hit his spine. There are also plentiful instances of cyberbullying that are coming out of the high school here in Brookline. Another parent had shared with me how a teacher at Brookline High School brought up the Gaza-Israel war in her classroom. The entire discussion was absolutely one-sided. Only students with ties to Israel had shared their thoughts and experiences, while one Palestinian student in class did not get the chance to speak or voice their concern and became quite upset because their voice was silenced. My own family has suffered an anti-Palestinian racism. While we were shopping at the Prudential Center, somebody screamed at us, "Go back to where you came from." We actually wish that all indigenous Palestinians had the opportunity to return to our homeland, but sadly, we are not allowed to by the Israeli government to go back to where we came from. Another Islamophobic occurrence right here in Brookline just this week was the presence of profane graffiti near Griggs Park. As a Palestinian resident of Brookline, I find this quite disheartening. The American Muslim community has been enduring collective grief for the loss of tens of thousands of innocent civilian lives in Gaza. Our community worries that speaking Arabic, which is their native language, or wearing a keffiyeh or a hijab, which is a headscarf, would now be conflated as terrorist supporters, and that we will suffer harm as a result. Sadly, if we support the most basic Palestinian human rights, we are at risk of harassment, intimidation, doxing, and threats to our personal safety, as we have seen this week. I request that the school committee put strict procedures in place to address false stereotypes and embracing the wonderful diversity of our community and promoting cultural understanding. We must create an environment where every single Brookline student, regardless of their background, is treated with dignity and respect. I agree that never again is now, never again for anyone. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Faiza Khan.
Hello? Yes. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Faiza Khan, and I live on Windsor Road in Precinct 13. Thank you for allowing me the time and opportunity to be here. I am here today as I have tried to attend some of these school committee meetings. You might have seen me here. And watching the last joint committee, the two subcommittees together, has brought a few notices and wonders to my mind. My notices are everyone on the school committee and the school leadership team, Dr. Guillory, all of you, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion are very well intended. Another notice is that all of us over here are trying to bring a divided and a hurt educational community together. My wonders from the last meetings are, what are the procedures for bringing in an outside speaker or an expert? When is this appropriate? Who decides? If school committee members decide, and there are more than one school committee members involved with the decision, to select the speakership to assure a member's personal feelings, views, biases are not dictating that selection. What efforts are made to offer an expert with alternative viewpoints? I wonder about all of the above because what we witnessed seemed to be a very one-sided educational presentation by 2 or 3 presenters invited by the school committee on the topic of IHRA definition adoption that will directly impact the curriculum. We know that even in the most intended groups and settings, education on the topic matters. I have heard multiple times on this forum, it is not the intent, it's the impact. Well, I mainly noticed a lack of education on the impact of such adoption on many groups. I also noticed a lack of care for the minority groups. I come with the knowledge that public schools in Massachusetts follow the curriculum that's set forth by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. The DESE curriculum has been put together by experts in the field, keeping in mind many factors. These curriculum experts are from a diverse background. If we are going to let the curriculum be influenced by individuals, majority groups, and so on and so forth, we are ignoring the needs of the minority students. My one wonder is where we think this path would lead us to. And if the goal and vision of this school committee is to only appease some of us, mostly the majority, then this group of decision makers has much more to think about than my wonders. As many of us wonder again and seek clarity and transparency on procedures and policies leading up to inviting speakers on a public forum, I suggest having a transparency, advance notice, open invite to all the constituents to weigh in on my notices above. Having served on a K-8 math program review and implementation committee here in Brookline, it represented many parents from many race, religion, and background. I know that many parents like me felt heard. There was an application process and all were invited to apply. Could and should a procedure or committee of that sort be formed where several voices are heard and not feel ignored? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rana Mumtaz, Precinct 15, and thank you so much for letting me speak tonight. I've been a Brookline resident for 20 plus years and a mother of 3 Brookline High School alums, and for the first time in my town, I am feeling silenced and scared. Since the onset of the war in Gaza, there has been a sharp increase in anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, and anti-Palestinian sentiment in our town. For example, vulgar and profane graffiti has been present on Brookline buildings, which has been reported to the Brookline Police Department. College students in Burlington, Vermont have been shot at simply for wearing a kafaya, a Palestinian scarf. These two are very current and very painful examples. Showing any humanitarian support for Palestinians has been equated to being supporters of terrorism and enduring eventual harm, whether it be physical or verbal. I'm asking you, as school committee members, to protect all students of this town from any verbal or physical abuse. This town has to remain united and be able to support our diversity and allow us to accept our cultural differences. Thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Sienna Schechterman.
Thank you. Good evening. So you already know me by now, because I'm standing here today for the 3rd time. addressing the same concerns, each time with growing sense of frustration and disappointment. Can you hear me well, even without me lifting the mic? Okay, excellent. So, anti-Semitism, this is my favorite subject, unfortunately. We can also use it more plainly as Jew hatred, is like a dormant virus. It waits to be resurfaced. The virus of Jewish hate has historically infected national movements, particularly those rooted in exclusive ethnic or religious identities. This virus has also infiltrated the social communist political movement. As a Soviet Jew, my family and I have experienced it firsthand. For the last couple of months, we have witnessed the detrimental impact of this virus, this Jew hate virus, on American liberal movements. As someone with liberal views myself, it pains me to see young people inadvertently expressing biased and anti-Semitic ideas in the name of social justice, contributing to the dangerous rise of bigotry against Jews amid Israel conflict with Hamas. Rather than identifying this behavior for what it is, many in our community, particularly young people aspiring for justice, unknowingly lend support to the Hamas terrorist cause. Our progressive-minded children witness their peers aligning with Hamas as an extension of recent racial and social justice movements dominating local and national politics. As a result, Jewish and Israeli children are reluctant to speak their minds in class. Standing with Israel, many feel marginalized during political debates, fearing a backlash or cancellation from their peers. Teachers, lacking the skills and knowledge to facilitate these conversations and create safe space for all students, are suggesting that Jewish Israeli students will step away from discussions about Israel. That's a real example, and we've heard about that multiple times. You'll hear more about it tonight. Is this the best that we can offer in our school system? Our renowned school system? This is what we're capable to offer our students. We cannot create a safe space for our Jewish students to speak their minds. We reassure our children that this behavior stems from ignorance, not from hate. It stems from lack of interest in learning history. It stems from the current trends in virtue signaling. But this is a very dangerous trend. We need to fight this virus. Similar to dealing with the coronavirus, we must protect our teachers by vaccinating them with knowledge. They need education. We need to equip them with historical facts, with tools, with best practices on how to create safe spaces for our children to have a thoughtful conversation. We have provided the district with vetted resources, with organizations, with credible individuals. Why is this implementation taking so long?
Our next speaker is Ms. Danielle Lentz.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you again today. And like some others speaking today, I would like to come again and emphasize some of the points that were brought up previously before this committee regarding the importance of defining anti-Semitism in the context of our schools, and more importantly, conducting teacher training and subsequent discussions with our students on the differences between free speech and hate speech. I understand that there's a concern in our community that definitions of anti-Semitism will overstep into limitations of free speech. That said, since October 7th, we have been exposed to increasing levels of disturbing and cynical use of this important right to express sheer hate for Israeli and Jewish people, not only crossing the border of free speech, but suggesting justification for the complete annihilation of Israel and Jewish people. Some even suggested in the previous meeting that no such definition is required. While crossing from support of Palestinian rights to from the river to the sea suggests otherwise. People have gone as far as the mapping project, some of you may have heard about, clearly pointing out Israeli and Jewish-owned businesses and with addresses and information there, and I quote, to dismantle and disrupt Boston Jewish community organizations that goes as far as saying that every entity has an address and every network can be disrupted. I've mentioned when standing here 2 weeks ago, this forum cannot unfortunately address anti-Semitism in the general Boston area. However, this example and events we've seen in universities and even in high schools in the past 2 weeks should emphasize to all of us the need to address the rise in anti-Semitism and the need for clear definitions. 2 weeks ago when I stood here, my son afterwards told me that I didn't emphasize enough that the kids are asking to discuss these matters in the class, to express their fears, to have a safe space with their teachers and friends to conduct a discussion. I understand that this terrifies our teachers, but with the proper definitions and guidelines, and with a clear directive to oppose hate speeches and act always, this is actually an opportunity to educate our kids. Isn't that what we're supposed to aspire to? Paraphrasing from a known Arab-Israeli journalist, one of the most significant wars we are fighting for right now is the truth. This war is going to extend way beyond the war between Israel and Gaza, and should be relevant for every person in the world, as it may one day affect them. In a world where everyone with enough followers can reinvent the truth, and nothing is considered proof, school should be a place where some truth are presented as absolute, where some principles are always followed, where hate is always avoided. Any hate, but especially generalized hate, should be always avoided and never ignored. This is an educational development opportunity for both our teachers and our kids that should be relevant for everyone. I urge you to use it wisely.
Our next speaker is Ms. Donna Perry.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to participate yet again in public comment. I'm here this evening to underscore the importance of the work that we've only just begun here in our district. And I want to touch on a few key points that are on my mind. On October 12th, many of us that are in this room stood before the committee, dumbfounded, angry, hurt, and intensely scarred by the horrors that our friends, our neighbors, our loved ones experienced in Israel and in Gaza. That anguish was intensified and complicated by the second front that was building for Jews and Israelis and for Palestinians and Arabs in the diaspora, which is the battle against hate speech, against misinformation, against misunderstanding, that was unleashed all around the world and even here in Brookline with Dr. Guillory's now infamous educator resource guide. On that evening of October 12th, one of the few actionable items that this committee proposed was a series of listening sessions. I'm sure you all remember. I'm here today to remind you of that commitment and urge you to follow through on it, prioritizing the Brookline High School community in your timeline. We really need the opportunity for dialogue with you and with our district leaders and with BHS leadership. We need to share what our kids are feeling and seeing so that the homeschool partnership that we value so keenly in Brookline can begin to heal some of the wounds in this community. I'm also here to ask that the Brookline schools continue to honor their commitment to fighting hate speech and creating safe learning environments for all students, regardless of race, color, religion, ethnicity, gender, ability, and other differentiators, by creating practices and protocols to protect and engage every student from hate speech. 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, I stood up here to ask that procedures be put in place to outline the definition of hate speech and answer many of the procedural questions that exist, like what types of hate speech should be reported, who is notified when a hate speech incident is reported, how long is the investigation period, who's responsible for investigating, what type of documentation must be maintained, how is an investigation resolved. We have so many of these protocols in place for bullying, and they need to be clearly defined and applied in the case of hate speech incidents. Aligned with procedures for addressing and reporting of hate speech is the need for training. So training those that investigate hate speech, like Brian Poon at the Brookline High School. Like, I wonder, does he even know what he's investigating when he's investigating hate speech? But also training for educators who need guidance on what is reportable and what isn't. For many of us, we have teenagers at home, and they are engulfed by anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim sentiment, just hate all around them. I have a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old who are bombarded in social media and in their daily life. I have friends' kids who are getting into Ubers and being asked if they're Jewish. I have a daughter who sits in a classroom having to listen to other kids defend Hamas. The streets in Brookline don't feel safe anymore. Before I speak Hebrew in public, I look around me. When I leave the synagogue, I make sure no one's following me. I've told my daughter to take off any Jewish identifying jewelry. I think that we're all tired. I'm tired. I'm sick of standing here week after week. I am exhausted by the stories that I hear of Brookline students and educators who are fighting a growing tide of hate speech and anti-Semitism. And every single one of the stories that we hear breaks off a tiny piece of our heart. I think that's probably true for you too. But I love my kids more than I hate seeing what's happening around this world and in our community. And I ask you to please take action. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Efrat Frankel.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So I'm Efrat Frankel. I'm from Israel, obviously. And I came here several years ago. My older son, Itai, has graduated on Brookline High School in 2020, and my younger son, Uri, is now a senior in Brookline High School. So before I start to speak of anti-Semitism or hate speech, I want to make clear that for the past 10 months, I spent a huge amount of time and energy protesting Netanyahu's government, and even more so after October 7. So it's allowed to criticize Israel for what's going on in Israel and still want to make a clear-cut line between hate speech, anti-Semitism, anti-Islam as well, and freedom of speech. And I want the school committee and Superintendent Gilroy to make sure that you're making and drawing this line. My oldest son, Itai, told me that he had a history teacher about 5 years ago, do you hear me? Who used only resources of one side of the Middle East conflict to discuss global justice. When Itai confronted him about being biased and using one-sided sources, the teacher told him he could leave the class without penalty. This happened 5 years ago, and just imagine what is going on this year after October 7th with his Jewish students, and how do they feel now in the midst of all this horror? I know of other students, Uri's friends, who either leave the classroom or try to disappear in their chairs when they confront discussions like this with their friends or in classroom itself. I know of students who are I know some students are strong enough and dare to answer, but some of them are afraid. My friend's daughter, a gentle and sweet fifth grader, is sitting with her friends and hiding her face. She doesn't know what to answer. She is not equipped with enough knowledge and ability to manage with the complex situation. She is sad and afraid. Then she comes home and tells her mother, what should I have done? What should I have answered? Should I defend Israel and then be target to my friend's hate speech? But this is what she's asking. Okay, just a moment. The public school of Brookline proud themselves of a vivid and diverse community. So just as we don't want hate speeches directed to other minorities, and we don't want that, I want you to make sure to understand that we don't want that. We want the Islamic who wears kafia or hijab to be able to walk like that proudly, and the religious Jews who wear Magen David or kippah to walk proudly. This is what we want. This is what we wish for in this vivid and diverse community. So what we're asking of you, to make sure you educate the educators about historic facts. Make sure you create a safe speech for our children, where they don't need to hide their opinions, their fears, and their worries. Make sure that the messages and ideas are based on facts and not on the shallow or fake TikTok or Instagram videos. This is what they watch, this is what they see, this is how they start chanting what they are chanting. And please, please make sure you understand Hamas is a terror organization, not a legitimate tool in the conflict between Israel and the Islamic countries surrounding it. Public school system in the United States has failed us. Education is supposed to help the young upcoming generation to differentiate between good and bad, right or wrong. Bin Laden should not become the hero of his generation. We can't let TikTok or Instagram educate our children. Our educators are ill-equipped because it's difficult to grasp complex situation. Still, they need to get this complex situation understood. You should make this message loud and clear, and thank you.
Next up, we have Ms. Ruth Kaplan.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Ruth Kaplan, and I've met with some of you already and written to some of you, and including the Dr. Gilroy. Thank you. It's good to see you again. The atrocities that occurred in Israel on October 7th continue to impact us in Brookline, which is not immune from the tsunami of anti-Semitism unleashed in America. Jewish people are scared, even here in this town, which is a remarkable thing to say, having grown up here myself. Everybody knows that a swastika on school property is Jew hatred, but there is understandably confusion when anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment overlap. While criticism of Israel is entirely legitimate, statements that deny the Jewish people their right to self-determination by claiming the very existence of the state of Israel is a racist or settler colonialist endeavor is anti-Semitism. Harvard President Gay has explicitly stated that the chant, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," Hamas's rallying call, represents overt Jew hatred since it calls for Israel's destruction. I want to direct your attention tonight to a really helpful document that should be a mandatory reading for all staff. The Massachusetts Attorney General's Office has issued what's called a guidance on schools' legal obligation to prevent and address hate and bias incidents. I have a copy of it here. It's about 6 pages long. This guidance defines bias-related harassment prohibited in public schools as conduct that creates an intimidating or hostile environment for a student because of their race, religion, or national origin. It can be a one-time incident, and it does not require that a specific individual be targeted. Moreover, schools are responsible for addressing off-campus harassment. I'm just paraphrasing this guidance, by the way, including social media posts that have serious carryover effects on victims at school. I want to really emphasize this point. Schools are legally required to protect students from peer harassment through social media that creates an intimidating or hostile school environment. Incidents that involve texting or other online activity may qualify even if the activity originates outside of the school during non-school hours. And finally, the AG states that schools should feel confident that they can effectively respond to harassment without infringing on legal protections for student speech. Most incidents of bullying and harassment involve either threats or so-called fighting words and are not protected by the First Amendment. I also want to call your attention to another really helpful resource produced by the American Jewish Committee, which is called Translate Hate: Stopping Anti-Semitism Starts with Understanding It. This guide contains a glossary of anti-Semitic terms that have specifically emerged after October 7th, with an explanation of why such terms are discriminatory. Our school staff and students need education now. I know I'm repeating what others have said, on why delegitimization of Israel crosses the line into anti-Semitism. I imagine most kids don't even understand the implications of these hateful slogans. Racial epithets are off limits, as they should be. So should language calling for the destruction of the Jewish state. I want to thank you all for your time and for your commitment to combating hate and getting this right in Brookline schools. Thank you.
Next, we have Ms. Isabella Gafour.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Great. All right. My name is Isabella Gafour. I'm a Muslim student from Brookline. I graduated from BHS in 2019 and just graduated from Cornell in May. I'm going to do my best to shed light on the perspective of younger people in this matter. In the last month, I've seen an intense shift in social media and public rhetoric. After the horrible attacks on October 7th, the world offered outpouring love and support for their Jewish brothers and sisters and quickly claimed to stand with Israel. However, as the days went on, Israel began bombing innocent children, women, and families in their homes, hospitals, and refugee camps. People began to question their support for Israel. People not just in Brookline, but around the world are quickly learning and realizing that standing with Jewish brothers and sisters and standing with Israel do not have to coexist. People who were quick to repost, "I stand with Israel" on October 7th are now demanding a ceasefire and demanding that the Israeli government immediately stop murdering innocent lives. Defining things like anti-Semitism and Islamophobia is a huge challenge, but what I will say is that it is absolutely unfair to portray the belief and hope for Palestinian liberation as an attack on Jewish brothers and sisters. And if that is what you do believe, then I want to ask you, if praying and fighting for freedom in Palestine is anti-Semitic, then why isn't supporting the Israeli government's murder and displacement of Palestinian lives Islamophobic? Conflating critique towards Israel with anti-Semitism is a dangerous ploy that is being used to silence Muslim voices. Just this weekend, as many have pointed out, 3 Muslim students were shot for simply speaking Arabic with each other and wearing a traditional Palestinian scarf. Muslims are tired, and we are tired of being accused of anti-Semitism for simply grieving our Palestinian brothers and sisters and praying for their liberation. We, or at least I, will never, and I mean never, apologize for fighting for Palestinian liberation. And remember, your children have access to every single news update, every single piece of information, and they will not go along with definitions or opinions that are expected of them if they do not stand by them themselves. Just look around to Harvard, MIT, Brandeis, and Brown, all schools where students, many of them Jewish, have been arrested for simply peacefully protesting and denouncing their school's support for the Israeli government. Students are energized, strong-willed, and determined, and you are lying to yourself if you truly believe you can censor or control their education with definitions you create for them. Thank you.
All right, our next speaker is Miss Alicia Khan.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me?
We can, yes.
My name is Alicia Khan. I am a Muslim BHS alum who spent 15 years as a student in the Brookline school system. My parents trusted the Brookline school community. They sent me to school every day thinking I was safe, as any parent does. However, they had no idea that Brookline schools are a dangerous place for Muslim students. Throughout my time at Michael Driscoll School and Brookline High School, starting as young as second grade, I was the victim of continuous Islamophobic, anti-Muslim speech. I'd like to highlight a few comments made by my own classmates that are especially notable. In second grade, I was accused of working with Osama bin Laden as a 7-year-old. In fifth grade, I was accused of being an Arab spy. For context, I'm Pakistani. In seventh grade, my peers had become confident enough to blatantly call me a terrorist to my face every single day. In 11th grade, I was told I must be a Syrian refugee to have made it to Brookline High School. And just last month, after I posted about a local mosque being vandalized, I was messaged by my former best friend from kindergarten, who I have not spoken to in several years since she moved from Brookline to Israel. Here is the message. You support a terrorist organization if your little brain can't comprehend. Don't ever run into me when I visit Brookline. You grew up in a town where a huge chunk of the population is Jewish, and you have the nerve to say something. You think it's okay to rape and kidnap children. You should be ashamed of yourself. The same children who called me a terrorist back then accuse me now of supporting Hamas when I simply ask for Palestinians to live. The fact that I had to choose which incidents to share in this list, I wouldn't even have enough time to read the full list, is evidence enough that Brookline has failed its Muslim students. You might be wondering what could possibly drive one child to say these things to another, and I can inform you with confidence that it is due to two causes. Number one, the mistaken conflation of Muslims and the Muslim world with terrorism. And number two, the failure to effectively prevent Islamophobia in schools by the Brookline School Committee. The school committee now has another chance to protect its Muslim and Palestinian students. Just last week, we saw 3 Palestinian students shot for speaking Arabic and wearing keffiyehs in Burlington, Vermont. The school committee is mistaken if it believes Brookline is exempt from the hateful thoughts that drive these violent acts. Over the last few weeks, members of the select board have discussed anti-Semitism without bringing up Islamophobia at all, even though week after week, we beg you to make Brookline a safe place for Muslim students. I urge the school committee to act now and protect the safety of Muslims in Brookline. I never want to see another child go through what I did, and it is vital that we take this moment to act. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Naveen Taher.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? I believe I see nods.
We can hear you, yes.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for having me today. My name is Naveen. My family is originally from Egypt. My daughter is a junior at BHS. She's been in the Brookline school system since kindergarten and daycare, and also Brookline before that. Let me preface this by saying that her 2 closest friends since kindergarten are Jewish. One of them Israeli as well. So we've been friends for many, many years with those families. We've been to many bar and bat mitzvahs, seders, and exchanged a lot of Shana Tovas together. So I've come here today to speak to ensure that the school and any listeners and attendees understand what we as an Arab and Muslim community in Brookline, including our kids, have been going through since the events of October 7th. So after a terrible day where we lost 1,200 people plus in Israel, we're going on 2 months now where we've been seeing daily killing and destruction in Gaza, and where we've lost over 15,000 lives, including thousands of children. So not only are we dealing with the horrific daily images of what is being done to our community of friends and families in Palestine, it has been extremely disheartening to see behaviors from government and media continue to other us as Arabs and Muslims. So in many ways, making us seem less than or even subhuman. Narratives that make it easy not only to ignore us, but also to mistreat us as Arabs and a Muslim community and frame us as terrorists. And what's concerning is even commentary that has been shared before in this very same meeting and other subcommittee meetings insinuate that asking for things like a ceasefire or attending a protest for a ceasefire equates to being a terrorist, equating criticism of Israel or discussing history or hoping for Palestinian liberation is all equating to anti-Semitism. So as a rhetoric in general, this is not new to us as Arabs and Muslims. Many of us have experienced that regularly since 9/11 and arguably even earlier all around the world. And as cliche as it sounds, your words, whether it's as a school district, as a community, can lift us up together or continue to alienate and even cause physical harm to members of this community. And these kinds of narratives are heard by your children and generally the community. As many of the prior speakers have mentioned, outside of Brookline, we've seen horrific events unfold in the US over the past 2 months. You've seen the 6-year-old Palestinian boy killed in Illinois by his own landlord, 3 Palestinian college students shot last week in Vermont, the Stanford student being run over by a car, halal vendors in New York being accosted, in addition to incessant online and offline harassment all over that we keep seeing. And then not to take us too far, but now what we've seen we've seen those results in many ways already here in Brookline. As I believe Noor mentioned this week, graffiti right here by Griggs Park, specifically stating F Palestine with blood drops all around, among other things. And our BHS students right now are being harassed in different incidents, one of them being called a terrorist, others calling on IDF to annihilate the quote unquote annihilate the place, and not to mention generally our isolation of our kids in the school, worrying about what they can and cannot say or share. So I ask the school district to protect us as minorities in the decision you make and push for unity and inclusion for us, just like everybody else. And I ask the community to remember that Arabs and Muslims are your friends and neighbors from many, many years ago. So let's not change that now and bring us closer together. Thank you.
All right, and that concludes public comment for this evening. Our next agenda item. Our next agenda item will be the October 1st, 2023 enrollment report. Dr. Guillory.
Thank you, David. We have Megan Gainey from our Office of Registration and Enrollment online, and she is going to take us through our October 1 enrollment report, and then we will stand for any questions that you may have.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I will share the presentation that you had received earlier. Let's see. This evening, we're going to go over just the context, the snapshot in time. That is the October 1, 2023 enrollment report, which is submitted to DESE. I can confirm at this time we are finally certified with the state that our numbers are accurate and correct. Not every district is, but we are now. So happy to go over. We're going to talk about the enrollment over time. Just a nice gentle overview of where we are in comparison to years, several years in the past. We're going to look at the October 1 numbers in a variety of contexts from by school, by age group, and so forth. We'll look a little bit at what the budget projections estimated and where we actually landed. And then we'll talk a little bit about the story of what the enrollment demand was like entering into the beginning of this school year by taking a little snapshot of our summer enrollment period. This is the same as we've done each year for the last several years. So we'll follow the same pattern, and maybe we'll catch some patterns and learn some things together. Okay. So enrollment over time, the number for the overall pre-K to 12, including special programs, so our 18 to 22-year-old students. This year, that number is 7,039. That is a decrease of 21 students from last year. And then, which is still a rebound from our post-COVID period, but it is a decrease of 21 students.
Megan, can I just interrupt for 1 second? Betsy, is there any way for us, like, is it just my eyes or is it blurry? Is it my old eyes or is it blurry? It's my old eyes. I feel like okay, there you go. I'll just look over Steven's shoulder then. Thank you. Tiny fonts. Okay, sorry, Megan, go ahead.
Yep. Looking at some populations within that, our pre-K to 8 cohort was a decrease of 107 students from last year, with 38 of those being a decrease in our kindergarten class population. So 471 students are certified as our kindergarten students this year in comparison to 509 last year. So this is the smallest kindergarten class I have seen in my tenure here in the public schools of Brookline, looking at enrollment. And then at Brookline High School, our 9 through 12 and special program students is actually an increase of students of 86 students from last year. So while our K to 8s were down, our high school population was actually an increase overall. So the committee should have received the section report in addition to the slides for this presentation in advance as well. So that is yours to look at your leisure. But overall, we are looking at a BEEP cohort of 256 students this year. There are 10 students who were enrolled in our program as of October 1 who do not count in the certification for DESE because they are under the age of 3 years old at the time of October 1st. We have these students in our classrooms as general ed peers for their special education peers who may age into the BEEP program when they turn 3, so that they have balanced classrooms. So there are 10 students that are not counted, so we can add 10 if you like, in your mind. And then our K to 8s was 4,610. I've broken down each of the schools here in slightly larger font for you. I don't know if it's quite large enough, but slightly larger than on the screenshot that I have visually here for you. And the majority of our schools, our K-8 schools, the population decreased from last year, so the cohorts are a bit smaller. Brookline High School has 2,173 students this year. If we're looking at our elementary and high school students, that is 6,783, so that excludes the pre-K cohort. And then the overall number there makes 7,039. And then our out-of-district students are also not included in that 7,039. They are reported through a separate stream. So we count them, but they're just in a different reporting structure. So this year we have 65 students who we are reporting as out-of-district students. But keep in mind that just because of the way that structure works, there's actually more students who are out-of-district. Because there are some students who have cost sharing programs with other districts. If they have parents in 2 different municipalities, we share and trade every other year or every 2 years, however the agreement might work out between districts for reporting purposes. And then there are always a handful of students who we are represented as a district, but we have confidential settlements with them. So we are not reporting them in the same way as those other students. And I will just note that some of the changes in the section counts, if you really are looking at the nitty gritty of how many students are in each homeroom, there are some changes to the section counts from prior years. So there were some sections that have been collapsed.
If we can hold on one moment, Helen has a question. Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, I just wanted, when you were going through the numbers, this is as of October 1st, and I'm wondering if you have just the totals, for elementary and secondary, not today, what the difference is.
I do not have them for today, Helen.
Or a week ago, a month ago. I mean, if we've seen a rise or fall, or it's just basically stayed the same. That's sort of my question.
If we can come back to that at the end, I might have time to pull that up.
Sure, of course, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't, okay, no problem.
Yep, no, I just don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that this is not going to be the zenith. October 1 is never the zenith of enrollment for Brookline, or most districts, in fact. The number usually peaks in either December, January, or February. There's some variance over historical patterns. So this number is not the highest number we will see for FY24.
Thank you.
Any further questions before I move on to the next piece of information?
Stephen, go ahead.
Yeah, for some reason, I thought that we had caught up from our pre-pandemic numbers in the last demographic report. Do I completely misremember? I completely misremember. So we're still down a school from pre-pandemic, right? Roughly? And pretty static at that?
So this year, I would say, considering the numbers off by 21, that's about a classroom in our pre-K to 12 plus population. I would say that is fairly static.
The drop off happened from 1920 to 2021, and it stayed pretty steadily about a school down since then. I'm just looking at the grand total.
Yeah.
That's a yes.
I don't know what you mean by a school down. I don't want to.
All right, roughly the population of a school, about 700 students.
So I believe the overall population peaked at 7,777 students.
Mm-hmm.
I think. And so we are now at 7039. So.
Okay, thanks, Megan.
Calculate that in whatever way makes sense for you. It's about that much though.
Other questions? Just a question I have looking at the distribution among schools. I see that in some grade levels, there seems to be a significant difference in class size within the same grade. So in one space, I'm assuming there's an error perhaps. So for instance, Ruff and Ridley, 8th grade, says 18, 27, 24, and 24.
So these are accurate distributions of homerooms.
So could you explain why one class would have 27 and another would have 18?
I will defer to Dr. Guillory on how principals determine homeroom assignments, because that is something that's more outside of my area. These are just how they're represented with homerooms, but in 8th grade, I know it's a bit different.
So I think, so are you looking at, you see the numbers that he's referencing there, Megan, on FRR in the 8th grade?
I do, yep.
So I think we would have to look at that because in our other reports, the numbers seem to be pretty consistent, at least in the distribution that I have here. But I'll check on that. I couldn't imagine why one would be that different.
So sometimes those are just like the homerooms. And
Yes.
then when the kids go to the different, because this is 8th grade.
Yeah, that's
And
8th.
it's very different than in the other grades, K through 5, where they're in one classroom.
But I think what I would want to do is, so what you're talking about is those that may be in a separate program that may be domiciled in that particular classroom, but I want to verify that.
Yeah,
For
I think,
reporting purposes.
yeah.
So
But
these
no-
numbers, these section counts represent homerooms, which
Yeah.
are classrooms for our younger students, but for our middle school students, it may look a little different from school to school also, how they distribute those students.
Stephen, go ahead.
Well, one more question. So we got a number of emails this week asking about the third grade of Heath/Hayes. I guess I'll just start saying Hayes. I see that I know that there's a lot of variables that go into creating another section. I guess I didn't realize before that there are a number of third grades that actually have fewer students than that cohort at Hayes. What happens next year? Does that result in another section? Does that trigger a rethinking of how many sections? And what happens here?
So when you're looking at sectioning, the guidelines for K through 2 are 22 and grades 3 through 8 are 25. And we know that those are guidelines. So meaning that our current practice is to schedule up to that. And if it goes above that, then we start looking at considerations of either unfolding a section or either collapsing a section, depending on which way it goes.
No, I just mean that, like if you look at, there's actually fewer students in 8th grade at Hayes, or there's fewer students in 2nd grade, but there's more sections.
Right.
So I guess I was just curious about the mechanics of that.
Yep, so middle school is slightly different in that they are changing classes. But when we look at, for this year, when we were looking at the budgeting or the budgeting process here, the building leaders take a look and see where they can actually make these shifts when we're looking at staffing changes there. So it's not a one size sort of fits all. It's also looking at dynamics, grade level dynamics, kid dynamics as well. So, but the general notion there is that when you're looking at where one might collapse, as such, it also has to deal with how the schedule's actually built as well.
Thanks.
Mariah?
Just following up on the Heath third grade, because we did get the messages, and one of the messages, or many of them, all of them, because they were a form message for the most part, reference that the classroom, at least one of the 2 classrooms, is not large enough to hold the number of students. And I was wondering if you could just talk about, like, when this happens, there's the guidelines, but there's also the practical implications of classrooms. And so you, and in this case, ASA, are working together to look at how many students realistically can fit into a classroom. And even if that's going to stay at 2 sections, perhaps whether you switch with a different physical classroom, right, or something like that. I just want to, like, that, so that's the case, right? That
Absolutely.
that those decisions, there's the guidelines as a, that exist sort of as an overarching point of reference, but then there's the practical implications of what a classroom can truly hold, that you are working on the ground with ASA, and ASA directly himself working on those things, or any principal working.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And so schools that weren't built sort of under the MSBA guidelines per se, we have a lot of unique spaces. You can even think about Lincoln, some of the classroom spaces there. I think you all went through quite a bit of that when you were going through the COVID crisis, and the square footage and how many students could actually fit in particular rooms. So the physical plant itself is also a limiting reagent, or one that's considered in the process. So I think that is a fair point, not to just say, well, you just schedule up to the guidelines as well, but the locations, the classroom locations themselves also play a part in that.
And so there's definitely no question that, like, when you and the principals are working together, you're not saying, well, the guidelines say 25, so we're absolutely going to put in 25. You're looking at what actually fits.
What fits and what works there. And it's their recommendation, school's recommendation as to what can actually, what would actually work for their configuration. I think it's also important to note that at Heath, we are growing the RISE continuum there as well. And for next year, we're also looking to move BEEP, a BEEP classroom there as well. So the configuration of Heath Hayes will start to shift over the next few years.
Suzanne? Suzanne, and then we'll go to Natalia.
Okay, thanks. So, to kind of follow up what Mariah is saying, so it also gets confusing because you have these bubble or non-bubble years.
Mhm.
So you're going from some grades that'll have 3 sections, and then other grades will have 2 sections, and then, so let's say a 2-section goes to a 3-section, let's see how I want to say this. Anyway, when you have to switch, so you have to change classrooms is what I'm trying to say. And so it really gets quite confusing to juggle this all around. So if you have a 3-section third grade and a 2-section second grade coming in, then you're going to have an extra classroom, and then you may have another one that's larger, and that needs another classroom.
And at that particular juncture, you're also shifting from
Teachers as staff as well.
right,
Right.
but also the ratio, so the shift that occurs at that juncture as well. So yeah, lots of moving parts.
But I would like, again, the 25 is a guideline, but, maybe some considerations, be a little creative outside the box. If you have what we consider really a full classroom, perhaps we think about a para to be shared between 2 classes, or perhaps you have a split grade, so you have like a second, third combined. So you have, 10 of one and 10 of the other grade students. I mean, that's done at places, so that's a possibility. So I would like us to be open to kind of creatively think about how to best accommodate these really full classes.
Okay.
Natalia?
Thanks, David. And I also, I'm sort of trying to understand more from the emails from the parents. They sort of had the demand, as sort of Suzanne sort of alluded to it, if this year it's possible to have an aide or a para across the 2 classes to support, given it's such a big class size. So I'd like to know whether that is possible. But then for next year, I'm not quite sure. I'm hearing like there's complexity, but is it possible to add a class, and as I don't know if it was Mariah or someone else was talking, or maybe it was Stephen, like, and make another grade? I mean, I understand teachers are of a certain grade, but how much flexibility is it for someone who was a 5th grade teacher to then become a 3rd grade teacher or something like that, if there's a need? And finally, for new students, I'm trying to understand how this happened. Was it that a lot of new students entered at that grade level by chance? Like, would there be a chance when new students are enrolling to say, well, you are supposed to be at Heath, but because of class size, would you consider going to a different school? Is that within anybody's, like, is there flexibility for new students to be told that the class size would be really high, and there's a 17 kids class in a different school, or do we not have that flexibility right now in the guidelines?
That's a perfect answer for Megan to talk about that and the importance of our school zones, as well as our leveraging our buffers.
We absolutely use the buffers where at all possible. We have been lucky in that there have been no additional 3rd graders at the Hayes School in this post-summer period. I can say that my recollection of this section situation was based on information that was shared, that we thought we were going to be losing students that we didn't end up losing, because we do have a high churn rate here in Brookline. So that is a piece. It's nobody has the crystal ball. So we think something's going to happen, and statistically, sometimes it just doesn't work out. But as far as if a family were to come in with a 3rd grade child, we would inform them, and if they would prefer to go to a different school because they would think that that is better for their children's academic progress, the policy certainly allows for them to ask for that, and we would guide them through that process and support them accordingly. We would not force them to do that, but we would be able to offer it and explain it and discuss it with them and come up with a solution that the family felt most comfortable with.
Go ahead, Mariah.
Just as we're talking about the guidelines, though, I wonder, does it make sense to just sort of look back at them and see maybe there's ways to work in some of what you're talking about, Suzanne, and I don't even remember what they say. I don't even know that I've ever actually seen I've always seen reference to the numbers, but I don't know that I've actually ever seen like the guidelines. I'm just wondering, like, should we add in some of this color on, the idea that and maybe it already is there, but the idea that like the guidelines aren't, that they're modified by classroom shape or, classroom ability to accommodate, or that alternative, when classes get big, alternatives could be considered in terms of additional staffing support or whatever. I just don't know. And I'm just wondering if it's something I don't know when the last time it was looked at, and I'm wondering if it's an opportunity for us to just look at it and see if there's anything else we want to modify.
I do believe that the classroom size guidelines were adjusted last fiscal year as part of the post-COVID recovery budgetary closing situation.
I don't remember that, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. Did it happen? Does anyone else remember it? She said it where they were adopted, the class size guidelines were adjusted last year. I don't remember that.
Well, you went from, they were, what Megan's talking about is, I think during COVID, the
Oh, we
numbers
had
were-
reduced,
Right.
right, we had
Right.
reduced, right, okay,
Yeah.
yes. No, but is there actually a guidelines document?
So in the contract, it
Yes.
says
Right.
that, we will attempt as much as possible to keep classes under 25. I don't even think it references the K through 2, which we have probably for the last 15 years at least, if not more, tried to keep under 22. So that's sort of what we've done.
Okay.
And like the superintendent said just before, if there's, more than 25, then we look at seeing, do they need an aid? Will that help? It's really, and sometimes it happens, in the middle of the year.
Sure.
Too. It's not like it always happens, and people move in, people move out.
Right.
Next year you might have 3 less kids in this class. So you have to be careful. I think we need to allow our administrators to do what they think is best. It's also the makeup of the class. Sometimes there are more difficult classes that need to be smaller, and sometimes there are classes.
Helen, all of our children are angels.
I know that. Yours maybe, not mine.
But I guess,
yeah.
for me, enrollment, the impact of enrollment on everything else we do, and these classroom guidelines are really important.
Yeah.
And I want to say that I think that this is actually worth being written out, and what we mean in some of these things, even if it is that it's written that the discretion is at the level of the superintendent and staff to make these things. I think it's helpful to, because this conversation with Heath has happened, and we've had many discussions over the past couple of years in light of enrollment changes, to just be really clear on who gets to make these decisions, because the families were thinking that it was a school committee decision that their classes are that size, and as we're hearing tonight, there's a lot of staff discretion in that, which I believe also is rightfully so. And so how do we make sure that we're all on the same page and have transparency and communication about what we mean? So I would like to actually see it written down somewhere.
All right, how do others feel about that?
I think it's a problem writing something down like that. I think that it's important to allow some flexibility in all of this, because sometimes there's not even another classroom in a building to do that.
All right, let's get to Sarah first, who hasn't opined yet on this. No, that's fine, Helen. Go ahead, Sarah.
Actually going to say, no, I was going to say the same thing, that I really like letting this be a conversation with the principal. And I guess I was going to put in the additional thing in middle school that sometimes it's a language choice. So if you have one section of French, and that year everybody decides to go with French, you're going to have a larger middle school class of 27 for one of the homerooms, So there is a lot at play, but I think that at the same time, where Mariah is coming from is not taking the decision out of the hands of the principal. She is trying to make sure that we give the resources to the principal so that they can make the decision that they want to make.
And just to add to that, to document that it's the principal's, it's not to take away people's discretion, it's to document that they have discretion, which is a support for them.
Anyone else? Andy?
Can I ask Mariah what sort of document you're thinking of? Like it's something in the policy manual or some note
Yeah, maybe it's in the policy
existing
manual.
policy.
Policy on
School assignments.
classroom.
Could be a note
It
there.
would be, right, tacked into the classroom assignment section, and it could be a couple paragraphs that basically says the guidelines are historically these, and the school committee reserves the right to change those. I'm making all this up on the fly. You know, beyond those, the staff have the discretion to implement the different, you know, different classroom sizes based on many considerations, including language choice, classroom capacity, blah, 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 blah. And then we say, you know, something like, you know, if needed, school committee, you know, staff can also consider additional or alternative personnel arrangements to support their choices, something like that.
All right, that's something we could look at.
I'd be happy to draft a paragraph and for people to look at in policy if that was helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
And I did get confirmation, Principal Whitmore did message me about the FRR, and it is the TLC students that are enrolled in one class, which shifts that number up, but those students are in a sub-separate program.
All right, thank you for that
Principal
explanation.
Whitmore.
Megan, back to you.
Okay, I'm going to move on from looking at things from a school-based perspective to more of the age group cohort perspective. So this chart represents, I'll explain a little bit for those because different visuals work for different people in different ways. So this is going to represent different year of graduation cohorts as they're moving through our schools over the last 3 years. So you can just kind of see where things are maybe growing or decreasing, and if there are any patterns or stories that we can learn a little bit about what our groups of students are looking like at the moment. So at the left, you have our 2021 cohort, starting with kindergarten through 12th grade. Now, our 11th graders and 12th graders from that year are no longer part of our school system. They have graduated out, most of them. So they're in gray. And we move to October 2022. Our kindergartners become first graders, so that gray block moves down one. So that's the same group of children moving into their first grade environment and on down. So there's no cohort change for a kindergarten class going across the top because they're brand new. And then the third sort of grouping is the current school year. And what we can see is, you know, if we're looking across our kindergarten numbers for the last 3 years, you can see that we are smaller this year than the last 2 years overall. That cohort, you know, entry cohort, we're starting with a smaller number. And our grades 6 and 8 cohorts are those with the greatest attrition overall. We're losing students in grade 6 pretty uniformly. And grade 8 is also this year a key point of students with an outflow of overall net students in that sort of year of graduation in our schools. And this is not unusual for, especially for 6th grade students to be moving out in that way. Many families choose to go to private school to have a different educational experience for middle school for their children. Or if they have come to Brookline, they are often leaving when their children are entering around middle school. And fewer families come in newly with middle school students than they do with younger students, which is why we see often an increase in a cohort for first grade, for instance. You'll often see that grade bump up from their kindergarten cohort as opposed to go down. And then this year, our 9th grade cohort increased. There was also a good demand for grade 9. So I hope this is just, you know, maybe something to look at in detail later, but it is, I think, an interesting story to see how our children are moving around as they're growing through our system. Okay. Great. And I just want to touch on where we are, where we have landed essentially for October 1, and how that compares to the FY24 projected enrollment, which was prepared for the budgeting. book for this year. So the budget used essentially something like a 2% increase model. There's some nuances to it, I believe, but essentially it was used a 2% model. So that number was projected to be 7,195, and we landed again at 7,039. Excuse me. So we are 156 students off, which is about 2% from where we were expecting. And as I mentioned earlier, October 1 is not going to be the zenith. So of course, the number we project in a budget book, it is my understanding we would not want to be the actual magic number, because we will end up having more students that we are responsible to educate further into the school year. So we do need a little buffer. We do currently, for the following fiscal year, my understanding is that we have 2 to possibly 3 enrollment projection reports underway. We have prepared information from NESDEC, which we have used in the past. And we have employed Cropper McGibbon again to do a demography forecast for us to update from the pre-COVID period to where we are at now. And I believe there may even be a third internal group looking into this to help prepare projections for next year. So that's for next year, but for this year, we landed a little lower than we anticipated because there just wasn't as much growth as we thought.
All right, thank you. If we can just pause for a question. Valerie, go ahead.
Yes, thanks. It's a budget question, so I'm not sure, Megan, if it's for you or for Dr. Guillory. These numbers, these numbers, of course, aren't linear. So, negative 46 isn't representative of one school. So I'm wondering how many fewer staff, if any, this negative 2.17% is indicative of.
I would have to do some calculations on that, Val, because again, at different grade levels, it means different things. But I think the broader point here is that I expect that as we go over time, we're going to get closer to that 7195 as we get closer to the January season. But I think that's an interesting question you raise, and we can probably play around with some numbers on that.
Okay, thank you.
Natalia?
My guess is that it's not a lot. But it's just a guess. So
Right. No. Yeah. I mean, let me get some.
If you think about it, it's for every 50 kids, you have 49. And really, there's not a lot of difference in, like, if you were thinking you were going to have 50 kids, you're 2% below. So now you have 49. Well, in a classroom of 25, that means a half a kid less.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean a which means no difference, essentially.
Right. I mean,
it's like such a small difference at this scale and at the size of classes that we operate that it doesn't make a huge difference.
I mean, because again, if you look at it as a middle school student, a middle school schedule where you're teaching 4 sections, that's 100 kids. So that's essentially one teacher. You're looking at it at a middle school level.
Well, but even you have, let's say, 100 kids in a grade. If you now have 98, you have exactly 0 fewer teachers, right? So there's like no.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Right.
It's very small.
Right, Natalia?
Yeah, and maybe not for this conversation, but we did have in curriculum a conversation around the high school and the large class sizes. And in part, it was this idea that we had 100 more students. But from what I'm looking here is that was projected. This is was actually less than what was projected. So at some point, Mariah, maybe it is worth thinking through how the projections and budgets, because we heard loud and clear at curriculum that the high school expects that these class sizes will be that large next year if nothing changes in terms of FTEs and things like that. So I need to at some point understand a little better how these projections actually translate into positions, but maybe this isn't the right place, but I just wanted to highlight that it's not that we got it all wrong. Like what I'm seeing here in the data is not that we got it wrong in the high school. We actually got it a little closer right than the other projections.
I would just mention that later tonight, next, I don't know when it is, the next item after this, we're going to be talking about the guidelines, which do address the question of the high school staffing.
All right, go ahead, Megan.
Okay. So now just as a nice little snapshot, we're going to look at what I refer to as the summer churn analysis. So this takes a look at the activity, essentially, our inflow and outflow that takes place between June, which is to say at the end, the close of the school year, attendance, through September, the end of September, essentially, each year. So we're looking left to right, most recent to oldest. So 2021 and 22 is to our right, and you can see that the net gain and losses, there's quite a lot of losses in those cohorts. You're seeing fewer losses in the middle column, and actually this year there were no net losses in cohorts during this window of time, right? So this is not our overall cohort changes. This is just activity occurring during the summer period. So the withdrawals are referring to families who have left at the end of the school year and are notifying us, no, thank you, we have changed our plans and we will not return to start in September. And the new students enrolled refers to the students who have come through my office and sought to either enroll for the first time or to re-enroll after being away for whatever period of time, for whatever reason, having regained Brookline residency or returning from homeschool or returning from a private education experience, and so on and so forth. So the number of new students that we registered this summer was more than we did last summer, which
All right, we have a question from Helen. Helen, go ahead.
So it's interesting. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's almost a full school, but they're close. Do you find that when you have withdrawals and new students, is it spread evenly across the schools, or is it more in some areas and less in others?
It can vary from year to year, to be honest. There's certain you know, if there's a large family, they all go. You can see that it will impact a particular school community just by virtue of there's like 4 students going and one household. Sometimes we will see cohorts of folks coming in together, for instance, and this is not represented on this sheet, so it's a good neutral example. We had a number of students, adult students, coming to do a specific graduate program here at one of the universities. So there were like 8 families and they all got housing in the same neighborhood because they knew each other. They all came for the same period of time and they all left at the same time. So every once in a while you'll see something like that, but it's generally more evenly distributed. You will see neighborhoods that have higher rental opportunities. There might be a little bit more churn there than those neighborhoods with single family ownership, owner occupied homes. They tend to turn a little less, but the housing market here is pretty strong. So even those turn, they move around town too, even within the town. They're not
Thank you.
here, but there's movement.
Thank you.
So I think what this really tells is the story is that there is a strong demand for PSB enrollment, despite the fact that our overall number went down by 21 students. Those families who are coming newly to Brookline or returning to Brookline after time away, there is demand for those families to be participating in our public school system at a higher rate, basically, than there were last year. And then lastly, just a little bit look at where those students are coming from before they arrive here, those new enrollments over that summer period, over the last 3 years. So the new to education system, that orange, that bright, bold orange color, that refers to our kindergartners. Those are students who are new to public education, formal school-aged public education. So that just means we had a few more folks decide to come to Brookline for kindergarten after our, spring registration period was concluded. They picked our town and we got them registered. And there is a higher number of families who were most recently enrolled in Massachusetts public schools. So that means other public school families moving from other Massachusetts communities joining Brookline. So that was at a higher rate this year, which is wonderful to see the growth in our community of other public school families joining us. And then there was a smaller homeschool migration this year, which is a continuing downward trend over the last couple of years from the COVID period, where we had a very high home education population. That variance has slowed down quite a bit over the last 2 years. And then just to clarify that an international school, this does not have anything to do, none of this has anything to do with immigration status or English language education status. International school simply means that the last school that this child attended was located outside the United States. So they may be US citizens doing a sabbatical 1 year abroad as a family, and they're coming back. Or it may be a student who has gone through several countries on their way to get to Brookline. It just means that their last school was outside the United States, which just refers to the opening of the borders is evident here, because you can see that increased growth from international families returning a little bit. And we haven't covered anything for folks. I'll entertain any other questions, and I'll see if I can get the answer for Helen for the question that she had, now that I don't have the presentation on my screen also.
All right, any more questions? No? Seeing none, thank you very much, Megan. Very thorough presentation. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And let me just
Thank you, Megan.
give Helen the answer to her question.
All right, so we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is a presentation and discussion of revised district strategic plan. Dr. Fortuna.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you. I'm excited to be bringing this to you tonight. So I've been struggling with how to present this because it's such a dense plan that to go through it would take hours and hours. So I thought that what we would do is we would talk about it at a general level, and then the changes that we've made since we workshopped it together. So hopefully that works for everyone. The plan starts with our mission, vision, and the school committee's values, which you voted on, so you know those. They're just in this pretty format, thanks to Neil Gudka, our communication specialist. So you'll see all of those are included here. As you know, over the past year, we've been engaging in this process. The plan was developed using the Massachusetts Planning for Success model. And really what that model is you create a plan, you align all of your district's processes and procedures with that plan, and then you implement the approach to the plan. And the plan is aiming for consistency and to help support our current and future success. Over the past year, over 100 stakeholders engaged in this work. So even though I'm here presenting it, I'm here presenting the work of a multitude of stakeholders who have worked on this. So there's 4 overarching goals. The first is teaching and learning. And that's really about Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 instruction is the instruction that every student gets in their classroom, as well as multi-tiered systems of support. So that's the support system that other students who may be struggling with Tier 1 instruction, that they will receive. Our goal here is a big goal to increase achievement for students by establishing, implementing, and regularly assessing an equitable, cohesive, culturally relevant, consistent, standards-based curriculum. And we chose the areas of ELA, math, science, social studies, and world language. We were trying to narrow it down, and it kept broadening. Delivered using evidence-based, culturally responsive instruction. So I'm wondering if you all, so one of the big changes that we made that we heard at the workshop is that you would like to have seen this plan broken out by year. What are we going to do each year? So you'll see each goal is set up this way in the plan. We are calling FY 24, school year 24, this school year, our foundational year. We had discussed this at the workshop, that this was going to be the foundational year, because by the time we have voted on this and have community input, it'll be January. So this is our foundational year, and 25 next year will be year 1, then year 2, year 3.
You didn't cut yourself any slack, though, in foundational year, so.
We did not. There's a lot going on this year, and it's work that I'm really excited about and very proud of in teaching and learning. Actually, all of our work as a district, we're doing some pretty great things. And so then what we did based on our workshop is we came up, Dr. Guillory, next slide, please. With benchmarks for each year. The foundational benchmarks, the foundational year benchmarks are mostly input measures. It's mostly, did we do this or not? It's a yes, no. As we move into year 1, year 2, and year 3, what we're looking at is what we're doing for this goal, teaching and learning, is it impacting our students? And what we're looking at here is the achievement gap in our first measurement. One of the things that we found, and you're going to have an MCAS presentation coming up very soon, but one of the things that we found is that our students from traditionally marginalized populations, our Latinx and our Black African American students, are performing at levels well below their white and Asian peers. So we want to really, on the MCAS, now, we all know the MCAS is an imperfect measure. However, right now, until we get some other common assessments, it is the measure that we have to assess the progress that we are making. So we are hoping to increase by 3 percentage points over the previous year, how our Black and Latinx students are doing, and at a minimum, 1 percentage point for all of our students. 3 sounds like a small number, but statistically, it's actually a fairly ambitious goal. So we're very excited about that. Growth percentiles are how we're impacting what a student is learning. So it's year over year. So from 3rd to 4th grade, our 3rd grade students don't have growth scores, but from 3rd to 4th, from 4th to 5th, they get this growth score percentile. And if they're in the 40th to 60 range, that's considered typical growth. Right now, our students are falling below that 50, which is right in the middle of that range. So really what we're trying to do is in those subgroups in ELA and math, have our students maintain, at least for year 1, that 50th percentile for the growth score. And then we had heard at the workshop that we were using a measurement of 20% of students receiving special education services. We've changed that because we didn't want to have the false idea that we were capping the number of students that could receive services. So instead, what we're doing now is looking at the efficacy of our CST, our teacher support teams that we have. Sorry for the acronyms. I'll try to remember to explain them. Our child study team is what that stands for. But really what that is that's a support team where teachers can come and seek ideas for students that aren't making the progress that they anticipate making. You've had a presentation from Lisa about the disproportionality of our Black and Latinx students in special education. So again, we're targeting that disproportionality, and we're looking at how many students are being referred. And we're establishing the baseline data around that. And that goes along with our professional development plan, which is really around giving strategies to support these students.
Jody, could you, for the first two benchmarks, could you just remind us of where we currently stand on those measures? I'm just trying to get a sense of how big a jump this would represent.
We are at the 46th percentile for the growth for the first one. And right now, it depends on the subgroup that you're looking at. We have, I believe it's 28% are proficient in math, and it's slightly higher in ELA. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me.
Yeah, thanks.
Sarah?
When we decided to substitute in CST and looking at that as our area of growth, could you, I don't know if you know, but if you happen to know, is there a larger percentage of Black and Latinx students that get referred to CST than white students? Are we still addressing the same population, I guess?
Yes.
I'm looking at.
There we go. Thanks, Jody. I'm really excited to see the structural changes. I think it's really great to see the benchmarks and to understand. It helps me understand so much more what's going on. I have a primary question, two questions. One is structural, which is, I think when we talked in the workshop, we talked about mapping the milestones to the, I guess I'll say that, or I don't know what we're calling these, but I'll call them milestones in each year of what you're planning on doing against the against the benchmarks. I just trying to use the words that are the right words here. Do you have, I don't see that necessarily reflected here. Like, do you have any sort of, like, these things will connect to this benchmark? Is that
Yes.
available, like I'm sure you were trying to just make this like not as insanely complicated as it could be, but I would love to see that mapping, especially for teaching and learning, which when I looked at the different goals, some of them are much easier to wrap your brain around, and some of them, like this one, because there's so many things happening, is so dense. I would love to see that.
I can definitely provide you with that.
And then my question is on the benchmarks. The 4 benchmarks here, or I think, what? Well, I'll say the first 2, well, no, it depends on the year, but I'll say all of the benchmarks focus on Black, African American, and Latinx students. And there's no benchmarks for comparison to the general population. For example, if those students go up 3 points, but the general population goes up 5 points, that isn't reflected here and wouldn't be, I think we would generally consider that to be an exacerbation, but this would reflect that to be a success. So I don't see how those measurements, and there were, if I recall correctly, based on the presentation from last year and using this data, economically disadvantaged students, students with disabilities, and Black and Latinx students were the 3 student body groups who are significantly disproportionately low in using these measures of MCAS. And I'm just wondering, are we not going to be looking at those students' progress in this time period as well?
So the reason we didn't include, we will be looking at them. It's just not included in the plan.
Okay.
The reason that they're not included in the plan is that we found, as we disaggregated the data, that income wasn't a deciding factor. So for example, if you are white and low income, you are still outperforming your peers that are Black and not low income. So we thought we would focus on the two subgroups that really needed to have the light shine on them the most at this point, which was our Black and Latinx students.
And students with disabilities, how does that intersect with any of this?
So students with disabilities does intersect because of that disproportionality piece. They're included in both those subgroups as well.
I see. And are we going to be, but we will be also looking at general comparison data also?
We will. So for example, what you pointed out is really great. What we're trying to do is narrow the gap. So if our white and Asian students grow by 5 points and our Black and Latinx students only grow by 3, we still have the same problem, which is something we're just aware of. It was hard to capture in the benchmark. That's why we have at least one, at a minimum 1 percentile, and then we can go back and report on that so we can do the comparison there.
Stephen?
Hi.
Hi.
So just following off of the last point, I'm really excited about all these benchmarks. I fully support all of them. So continuing from a conversation we had yesterday, 2 days ago, at curriculum subcommittee, I think these are all equity-focused benchmarks, and I don't think that they capture any of the core values 1 and 2, joy in learning and excellence in teaching. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I have an answer to that for you, actually. So goal 3 is primarily about belonging and inclusion. And I actually had a lovely conversation with Dr. Dubois today, and we were talking about the Panorama Survey. And underneath that belonging indicator, what are the constellation of things? And one of those things is joy. So when we have the measurement of belonging increasing in the Panorama Survey, we're actually measuring the joy piece. The excellent in teaching piece, we're trying to get to through the benchmarks that are related to educator evaluation, and if those are aligned with the goals that we're doing. So
I see. That makes sense to me. I guess I would add, my concern about this would be that it suggests that all of our teaching and learning strategic goals are related to equity only. And I wouldn't want it to seem that we're neglecting our non-Black and African, non-Latinx populations, or that we don't have strategic goals pertaining to them. So I wonder if there aren't benchmarks related to general learning outcomes that could be among these indicators.
So the benchmarks, you're absolutely correct, are focused on our outlier students, because if we're lifting our students that are struggling the most, we're lifting the tide. If we look at the year 1, the input measures and what we're doing, those aren't as they are equity focused. They're not as exclusively focused on a single population.
Right.
And so we intend to do that for all populations.
And I guess that makes me think of my other comment from yesterday, is that I felt that the general excellence indicators were input focused, whereas the equity ones were more output and outcome focused. And I was hoping for a broader excellence indicator that could be output or outcome focused. But then we had I'm getting ahead, Suzanne, of your recap probably of the curriculum sub meeting that we talked about how MCAS is less than an ideal data set. And so it's hard to mine that really for deep evaluative for deep evaluation. Nevertheless, though, I think without any kind of output indicator around excellence, that it suggests that the emphasis of this goal is equity only, and that I don't think that captures the entirety of the work that you're planning for the year. Also, when goal number 1 was retitled Joy in Learning, I don't think it was entirely about belonging. I think it was also to try to broaden the idea that it wasn't entirely about academic achievement, but about lifelong learning. So belonging is definitely part of it, but I think academic achievement remains part of it as well. So I guess I just wanted to continue to encourage there to be some kind of output or outcome focused indicator relating to this part of the strategic plan.
And I agree with you, Stephen. It's difficult right now with
I
only
get
having
that.
one source. So
Right.
by making this a living document, I'm hoping that once we have that robust system of common assessments that is called for, we'll be able to write better indicators that
I
are
think
more.
that could even be the activity in year 1
Mhm.
is the identification of an indicator around academic excellence or academic achievement.
We can add that in, definitely.
Yeah, because now I'm repeating myself, but thanks.
Suzanne?
But, so Stephen, I'm looking at the benchmarks on year 1, and when it says 30 out of 30 completed educator observations reviewed show evidence of implementation, that says to me that's what we were trying to do, is to raise the bar for everybody and to do a stronger tier 1 instruction. And so I'm thinking that covers more than just a small group, but it includes everybody, as does the child study team meetings of having educators identify 3 new strategies. Again, it's not for a particular group, it's for everybody.
But those don't continue in years 2 and 3.
Some of them do, yeah.
No, the year 2 they're all 3 related to Black and Latinx students. And year 3 goes back, 3 of 4 are. So I guess that.
But
So you just
I
missed it in
agree
year
with
2.
you, Suzanne,
Yeah.
that that's an outcome indicator, but I think of teacher outcome indicators as an input into student outcome indicators. They're upstream from it to me. So I'm looking for a student outcome indicator
I
relating
see what you're saying.
to academic achievement or learning outcomes. I don't mean academic achievement, I mean learning outcomes specifically.
Thank you, Stephen.
Go ahead.
Excellent.
Oh, I'm sorry. Natalia?
I was just going to ask Stephen, like, I think based on your feedback, which I agreed on, at curriculum, they added the percentage of students in the aggregate who meet or exceed benchmarks will increase by a minimum of 1 percentage point. Would it make sense to add something about growth in the MCAS for all students as well? And actually, I did have a question of when you were saying, Jody, that it's closer to 40%, is that for the whole of Brookline or for Black and African American and Latinx students that it was lower than the 50%, the growth curve or whatever it's called, the growth percentile?
That was specifically for our Black and Latinx students. For our general population, it is closer to that 50% mark in the aggregate.
I just want to say that I agree with you, Jody, that the MCAS is at best as an interim data set to measure learning outcomes. So I don't think it needs to be a general learning outcome indicator, and that's why I think it makes sense to me if you want to propose the identification of an alternative learning outcome indicator somewhere in the foundational year 1.
We can definitely do that.
Okay.
Right. To Stephen's point, I'm curious about other indicators that you would potentially explore. I'm not asking you to settle on one now, but what are sort of
standards, right? Like that's what's already in the strategic plan. I'm talking
Yep.
about.
Nope, you got it, Stephen. You've been listening at curriculum subcommittee. So some of what we're looking at a combination of things. We're looking at some norm referenced and criterion referenced measures. We're actually going to have a study committee looking at those in ELA and math. So similar to what we have in M-class for grades K through 3, we're looking to expand that to 4 through 8. And we also have some practices that are happening now where with the math program, teachers are expected to give end of the unit assessments. What we need to get better at as a district is making sure that the testing conditions match, making sure that we're talking about the data and making sure we're capturing the data. So it'll be a more robust assessment system that we have for our students. We just haven't identified what the actual instrument is going to be yet.
Okay, thank you.
And then eventually, Sarah, they will be individualized and based on student interest. All right, so that's teaching and learning. Do we have any more questions about the teaching and learning piece? That's the densest part, so if we get through that, we're in good shape. All right, so goal 2 is really about community and connections. And for the period of the strategic plan, it's really focused on the formal methods that we have for communication. So one of the things that we're doing this year that we're really excited about is we're going to relaunch and revamp the district website. Our website gets a lot of traffic, which is pretty exciting. This was asked at the school committee, the curriculum subcommittee. From January 1st last year, of this year, 2023, we received 273,639 visits to our website. That peaked for us in February. I don't know what was happening here in February, but it peaked for us in February, and as you would expect, it drops down in July. So,
I think I was like 150,000 of those.
in February, I think I was a few too. And so what we really want to do is in year 1 next year is gather a way to get input, create a comprehensive way to gather input from our families. Right now we have a lot of what we would call one-way communication. We have the superintendent's newsletter, we have the website. So we have these one-way methods of communication, but we don't necessarily have an easy way for parents to give us input back in a way that's cohesive and comprehensive. So we're not always hearing about the things that people are happy about that's happening. As school committee members, I'm sure you know that you hear more about the negative things that are happening than the positive things. So we want to create a system where people can provide us with that feedback. And another piece that's here that actually aligns very nicely with Tier 1 is the vision of a graduate work that we need to do as a whole community. That's going to be part of our NEASC recommendations, that we need that. It's been several years since the community has engaged in a process where we identify what are the habits of those lifelong learners that we want to have, what do those outcomes look like. So you'll see that piece reflected here. And then we want in year 3, that's the year that we're going to revamp our report cards. You'll notice that we also, at that year, want to improve on our communication of student progress to caregivers in the broader community. So how can we leverage that work with report cards to communicate better with caregivers and the community as a whole about the success of our students? And then Neil helped come up with what he felt were some reasonable goals. And you'll see the same pattern of goals happening that you saw before, where they're very similar, but we increase each year during the plan. Sarah, go ahead.
I had some questions about these because first off, seeing the increase in traffic by 20% compared to the previous year, that's like incredibly ambitious, but an increase in traffic doesn't mean that people are getting what they need. If anything, it means I had to come back to the website because I couldn't find it the first time. So I would like to suggest that some of these measures I really like the third one about thinking about status. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what matters, is that people feel like they can get what they need from the channels that they go to when they need it. So I really like that, but I would like to suggest too that we don't just think about district caregivers, but that we think about whether we can implement on the website. There are some, and actually the town uses this already, but there's even like, there's a very simple little survey that you can put on the website so that anyone's visiting it, like it gives you a thumbs up, thumbs down, and you can provide more feedback if you want. So something like that would be really nice. Similarly, just going back, like the increase in traffic is ambitious and meaningless at this, and like maybe like counterproductive, but also I don't know what your click-through rates are in the middle thing of, I don't know what the engagement measure means there, but I don't know if it meant click-through rates or open rates. But those would be like huge changes, and that I don't think it's achievable, and I would be worried about setting yourself up for failure if that's what the goal was. But, and I really like the last one. Someone might not, anyways, I've said what I said about it, so.
Thank you, Mariah.
Yeah.
All right, goal 3. Any other things about communication? I'm sorry. Okay, goal 3, climate and culture. And this goal is really focused on belonging and inclusivity and safety for psychological safety for students. So if we look at this, you'll see things like our new SEL curriculum being rolled out at the elementary and the middle school. You'll see things like the belongingness, the trusted adults. Those things are included in here, things that you've heard about already, that are measures that we're doing that we are looking forward to scaling up and doing more completely. One of the things that's also here that I find as a really great benchmark is if we go to our year 1 benchmarks. Next one, there we go. By the end of the next school year, at least 70% of staff across all demographic groups will endorse a strong sense of school belonging. And we'll see how that plays into our other goals, goal number 4 that we have as well. But this is also where the school committee gets tasked with finishing the life of a school policy. That is included in this goal as well. And so I will entertain any questions that you have about this one. Right?
Can you just remind me what the current, did we have a current PSB staff belonging measurement? Okay.
No, that's a foundational year benchmark is to administer.
Okay, that's what I thought I remembered is it was going to be administered this year.
Yeah.
That's what Matt had mentioned. Okay. I was just wondering where the 70% came from. So we just don't like.
Matt felt that 70% was reasonable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Natalia?
Thanks again, Jody. I mean, after listening to public comment tonight, especially the student of Pakistani origin talking about sort of her experiences, I'm sort of heartbroken and realizing that, this is such an important goal. Like, I think it makes it so important to me. And I would like to see subpopulations if possible, if we have information. I also want to warn that, something like COVID or the current war, like, whatever the school does, there will be moments that, where, so I just don't know if the data, the benchmarks in moments of crisis will be as useful in the sense versus a time period when there's prosperity or, more peaceful. So I don't know. I'm just kind of, it was difficult for me listening to the students, and it has been, also in previous public comments, Jewish students who had felt really unheard and wanting to think through that a little bit. So I just wanted to raise that up a little bit and say, because I know we don't respond to public comment, that I was really heartbroken by the student who talked about her experiences over her time at BHS.
Thank you. That I think is important for us to remember as we look at this.
Mariah, go ahead.
Just on that, it is notable that these benchmarks are all general population, and teaching and learning is the exact opposite of a specific subpopulation. And it feels like, to Natalia's point, and to Stephen's points, we need to triangulate somewhere in between. So.
Yeah, I think the difference, the stark difference for us, or at least when we were thinking about it, was that academically, Our white and Asian students are doing very well and they're excelling, maybe not always because of what we're doing, but because they have the resources and the ability to use outside resources from the school. So I think our feeling here was that based on the data and the demographics that we create, this was more general and generalizable to to everybody. So I think that was the thinking
But
behind
didn't
that.
that present some disproportional data? I thought that there was data showing disproportional feelings of belonging.
There, yes,
Okay.
there is, especially between our LGBTQ plus community.
Ellen?
So just to follow up on what Natalia said, in the new panorama, or are we doing it already or have we done it?
We've done the panorama survey already.
But we.
Not the staff one. We've done the student one. We haven't done the staff one yet.
Did we ask anything about how has the events of the last few months, or it was before?
Oh, and we haven't administered it yet this year.
Oh, well, that's what I'm asking.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your
Okay,
question.
so my question is the following. Can we ask to include a question about how the events of the last few months have affected you? I think it would be really informative.
We can definitely, we have the ability to customize, so I can talk to Dr. Dubois about doing that.
I think that would be really good because I think it'll help us to understand, what's happening both at the elementary and the high school for all kids.
All right.
Thank you.
This is actually just like a math question, which is in teaching and learning, it's a multi-part question. I'm going back to teaching and learning I think you talked about reducing things by 3 points.
Increasing by 3, yeah.
Or not, I'm
3
sorry,
percentage
in general, changing by points. And here it refers to reducing by percentages of percentages.
Mhm.
And I think just for my question is and the reason I bring this up is because I was looking at the absenteeism one and it says decline by 12%. And I'm thinking, well, we're at 14% right now or 15%-ish. So are we talking about going to 3% or are we talking about going by reducing by 2 points, which is 12% of.
Excellent question.
Okay, so
2 percentage points.
Okay, but I'm thinking it might be helpful to clarify some of that wording in here because it's not clear. It's not clear which is meant. Did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mariah. Excellent point.
It's nitty gritty, but make sure we're all on the same page, right?
No, it's critical. Thank you.
Stephen?
So something you just said just totally clicked something into place in my brain that I want to ask Dr. Guillory.
Is that a good thing?
I don't know, but it just snapped something into place that's been nagging at me. So I'm really liking the strategic plan genuinely because I feel like what it does so well is it clearly specifies mitigation strategies around areas where I think there's a consensus where that PSB has weaknesses, and that we've took pains to elaborate that there are weaknesses, especially around equity. I mean that it took us a while around that core value where we were saying specifically, I think it was Andy who was really having us focus on no matter what the conditions of the student are, no matter where the student's coming from, where they're going to receive the same education as everybody else. When you just said that the white and Asian students are already doing pretty well, what's been nagging at me is I feel like what's not in the strategic plan in general are ways of shoring up, maintaining, leveraging areas of strength. It seems to me like the activities are almost entirely focused on mitigating weaknesses, that's what the strategic plan is largely about. Does that seem like a fair read of this plan? Because and in a lot of the areas I keep saying this seems like we're addressing this weakness or that weakness. Is that what the strategic plan is supposed to focus on, or am I misreading it with this generalization?
So I think that's a fair statement to where we want to build up. I think Jody used the analogy, high tide lifts all boats here in this regard. It doesn't mean that we're not going to continue doing those things that we're already doing well, but how can we really dig in deep and hard on those things where we're missing the mark? Because again, I think what I've heard consistently is that because our performance is high overall, we tend to just lump and not really dig deep on those that are not, where for whom the system is not working well. And so I think this is an opportunity to really do that. I think also the notion that our approach to this strategic plan is that this is going to be a living, breathing document. So it's not going to sit on the shelf and be admired, but that we're going to actually be digging in it and teasing it apart. And as we're working through, we'll be making mid-course adjustments. So we're not going to wait until we get to the finish line and then do the autopsy report. We'll be continuously assessing how we're doing along the way and making significant adjustments where needed. But I think your assessment, I think, is a fair characterization.
Okay, I'm not opposed to that.
No,
because it just, maybe this is like, we don't have to include all those, because then we don't need specific learning outcome measures, where I was hoping to see those learning outcome measures, because we're looking to focus specifically on remediating areas of particular weakness right now, and we're already doing, I mean,
I think you were right.
okay, like, it's just, I'm going to stop talking. Thanks.
Andy?
So still under climate and culture, I seem to remember that when we talked about this plan at the workshop, someone had the idea that something useful to measure could be retention of educators from some underrepresented subgroups. Wondering, did you go on to sort of think more about that after the workshop, and where did that land?
Goal number 4.
Oh, it's coming up. Okay,
Yeah,
great.
it's coming up.
Excellent. Well, I'll wait for that then. Thanks.
And Mariah, to your eyes, I had to print it out so that I could see it, because I knew I wouldn't be able to see it on anything else.
I refuse to believe that my eyes are the only problem.
So goal number 4, and I have Dr. Givens here to help answer any questions as well, because now we're starting to move towards the operations, finance, human resources part of the organization. So our goal number 4 is focused on management and capacity building. And what we want to do is we want to develop our resource management and capacity building systems that will ensure that our educational and organizational goals are accomplished in a timely and transparent manner. So if we have 4 major initiatives that fall under this goal. One is what you're going to vote on next, is our budget guidelines, but we want to make sure that the budget that we have is aligned to the district improvement plan or the strategic plan and our school improvement plans. And we want to make sure that that budget is clear and understandable to all stakeholders involved. We want to, and this, Andy, goes to what you were talking about, we want to develop and implement a human resource model, and you'll see this in the breakdown of this initiative, that is designed to recruit, retain, and sustain talent in all positions, but diverse talent in those positions. We want to create processes and procedures that are predictable and transparent. One of the things, going to our areas of weakness is we don't always have a lot of predictability and transparency, and it gets confusing for our principals, our curriculum directors, and I can imagine for our stakeholders as well. And we want to create a professional development plan that's designed to build the capacity of all staff to perform, all staff, not just our educational facing staff, but all staff, so that they can perform their roles in service of our mission, vision, and core values. And so I'm missing a page. That's always fun. If we look at, thank you. So if we look at this, what you'll see is, Andy, in year 1, the 3rd bullet down, we are talking about that diversity and that diversified work plan. the diversified workforce, and how, with some steps about how we're going to do that. Does that help?
It does, although my question was maybe more like, is retention of, educators from certain subgroups something we can now begin to just measure, right, and make that an actual benchmark?
We can definitely do that. We can get some baseline data now. And now that we're getting our human resource side of the shop, thanks to Dr. Given's hard work and her team's hard work, we can definitely get some baseline data and write some objectives around that.
Just if you feel able to do that, I do think that would be super helpful in meeting some of our major goals.
Into our system ways to measure that. We don't have that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's absolutely something that we're working on. Creating
A place where we have to start, and I know you're aware of this, is getting accurate data about who's working here now, and which we don't have, despite everybody's best attempts to find it. So that would probably be a foundational year benchmark, and then baseline data next year, and then year 2 and year 3.
Yeah.
Mariah?
This is just an acronym question. In foundational year, the second bullet, it says develop a 10-year enrollment projection to guide program and staffing decisions and align DIP and SIP process to the budget development process. Is DIP departmental improvement?
District.
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 Ah, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is that defined anywhere?
It's not. We can make sure that it is.
Okay. Do we have a district improvement plan? Oh, okay. Can we just use strategic plan then? Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions about this goal? Okay.
Question. It's a wording choice. What is sustaining talent? What is the definition of sustaining talent in this context?
Would you like?
So when we're talking about sustaining them, I guess it's
You might want to come to the mic so that people watching can hear you.
So sustaining would be engagement over time, right? To make sure that staff, as they're moving through their career arc here, that they're feeling engaged and challenged at all time. So that's what sustaining would mean in that context.
Thank you.
Any other questions about goal 4? And goal 5 is titled governance, and it's really about governance and what our structure looks like. So if we click into the goal, we'll see that there's 2 main initiatives here. The first is create and disseminate an org chart with clearly identified roles and responsibilities in all areas. We have an org chart, but we need to really work on the roles and responsibilities. And as you know, OAF is undergoing a reimagination now. OEE will be undertaking that next, then OTL, and then Linus will get to have a shot at reorganizing the whole thing to look at it to see if the things that we did in our first years are working to help keep us efficient and working the way that we should be. So this is really the crux of this goal, is about organizing central office departments in service of student learning for efficiency and to get the highest outcomes. And that's the strategic plan. What we're hoping for next steps is I'll implement these suggestions that you made tonight What I'm asking for tonight is permission to send this out with a survey to our caregivers, our teachers, and our staff to make sure, double check, triple check, probably at this point it's quadruple check, that we have the right priorities, and to get some feedback from them on the plan so that we can incorporate it and bring it back to the committee for a vote on December 14th, Betsy? December 14th. It's ambitious, but we can do it.
Can I ask a question? Is it possible, and I would like to, I would really hope that it is, to not limit our surveying to only PSB families, caregivers, staff? I think that we should, through the PSB website, make a survey available there, push that out through the town website, push that out through the town's PR like news portal. I think that one of the things that was noted early on was that there weren't necessarily stakeholders participating in the development who weren't like already engaged in the system. So to the extent that we can make sure that we incorporate their feedback on this near final but not final product, I think that would be really important to make sure that we're doing that.
We can certainly do that.
That would be great. And you were just using inclusive language around caregivers as well. And I'm wondering if you could take us, like, as before this goes out, take another scrub through it to make sure that it is, because I noticed some language in here which isn't, around like families as opposed to caregivers and so forth.
Excellent. I'll make sure that we do
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, thank you very much for that presentation. I can see that it's generated a lot of excitement on the committee, and we're very happy with it. And I think I'm hearing that you have the green light to go ahead and put it out there to these different stakeholder groups. And I second what Mariah said about also reaching out to those in the broader community around Brookline in a variety of contexts. We've often heard from non-current PSB families and caregivers who say that they still feel deeply invested in the schools, but they hear about everything at the 11th hour. And part of that is because they're not reached earlier on. That's a challenge that the town has to address more broadly about how we maintain databases with all these names and contact information. But to the extent that we're able to do that with some of Mariah's suggestions, I think we should definitely pursue it.
Absolutely.
Are we also translating this?
Yes.
Okay, will it be available to the public in translation, like before it goes out circulated, or no?
No.
Not even in a
Not
Google
with the
Translate?
turnaround time.
Not
Google
even-
Translate we can
Okay,
do.
so at least like a rough draft translation?
Yep.
Okay,
That we can do.
thank you.
All right, thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you, everyone.
So we will now move on to our next agenda item, which is a second reading and possible vote of the FY25 budget guidelines. Mariah?
Thanks. I think this is printed out, so I'm gonna look at that copy. So we met about this 2 weeks-ish ago, 2.5 weeks ago was the last time we talked about this. And in response to the conversation, several edits were made. Minor copy edit at the top. Under 2A for equity, there was wording change there that you can see. The old language is struck out and new language that's included. And that new language was developed by Lisa and I yesterday after a meeting where we talked about the different things going on. And so that's language that she endorsed and I really liked too. And so I think, I don't know if other people have comments, but let me go all the way through. Just the last area is reflecting the conversation, that there was a conversation about that people hadn't seen an educational equity strategy, so they didn't necessarily want to fund something that they hadn't seen. And so I added some wording in here to sort of disambiguate to separate the eventual funding of the strategy from a approval process or such. So to make it clear that approving this didn't leapfrog the opportunity to see the educational equity strategy in the future. I don't know if the wording I put there meets everyone's desire for that, but that was the goal in that wording. So those are the only changes from last time. And I leave it open.
Can I ask a question? So on the last one on the budget, I'm a little confused. You say to return, which I think the first sentence is great, return to the prior practice of holding reserve funds for a limited number of staff. But then why over a couple of years to lessen the impact?
One of the things we talked at the finance meeting you missed, we talked about that. And so I'll recap that conversation, which was that if we were to, for example, go back to holding the prior practice of, I can't remember if it was 400, it was between $400,000 and $500,000 in a reserve. So if we were to do that in 1 year, it might require making very drastic cuts in 1 year to current staffing to be able to claw those funds back. But if we do it over several years, it allows us to be more opportunistic and rebuild it without making a drastic change in any 1 year.
Got it.
That was something that we discussed with Susan at finance of how to achieve that goal without,
Thank you
making
for
it.
explaining that. I appreciate it.
Anyone else? I really like it. I am prepared to move it.
Can I just?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I know it's already on, this isn't new, but for that, what is this, equity, D, fund summer programming for fiscal year 29.
Yeah.
So what are we doing in the meantime? I mean, why is it out that many years is what I'm wondering.
Well, it could be sooner. The idea was that it would be by then.
I see. So,
yes.
So it's not saying we're waiting until 20.
No, yeah, it says by then. A lot of them have these sort of modifiers. Almost none of them have the for a specific year, but some of them are starting in or by.
Well, a lot of them are by, but they're 26 or 25, and this is 29. It feels so
It is.
far out. Okay.
Well, do we want to change that? Do we want to make it sooner?
Yeah, I would as a guideline. Yeah.
What might be a better way to do it is if there is funding prior to that, that we would use it for that rather than, but with the goal of definitely having it by 29 might be a way to approach it.
Well, I think that's my interpretation of what it says now. It could say no later than FY20. I mean, does people prefer that? But it sounds like Suzanne wants it to be.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're trying to get it in, as soon as we can. And it doesn't have to be the whole thing, right? It could be incremental.
It could.
So I just want to make sure we think about that.
So do we want to put in a by no later than and have language about incremental?
Well, so now it says by FY29, which is many years away. I would like us to start thinking about it sooner.
So I don't think it's mutually exclusive. We can
Right.
certainly think about these sooner. I personally would like to be moving on increased summer offerings even for this summer. But to Mariah's point, we can only do so much at once.
Right.
By 2029, FY29 also includes FY25.
Jody, do you have an opinion on that? I'm curious if you might. I'm sure you have an opinion on that.
So it's actually a body of work that I'm excited about. We have our first summer planning meeting on Monday. I'm really excited for this year. My concern is being able to staff a fully expanded program. So that's a piece that we'll have to monitor. I think as the workforce continues to keep coming back, we'll be able to expand it. But I like that language by 29, like that gives us a time to grow what we have now into something really robust.
Okay, thanks, Jody.
The way I read by the FY29 section though, so under letter D, it's not saying it has to be full, it's just saying expanding. So that's something we could get on right away, I would think. Expanding can even mean.
I wonder if I would maybe I would use one of the words that Jody just used, which is robust, fund robust summer programming by FY29, with the idea that we might be evolving over time and working towards activities.
Yep.
would people like that to, so it's not just something happening in 29, but really by 29, we're really reached a really good spot.
Maybe my question is related to this, which is as you begin to think about this and sort of abstracting from any staffing problems for now. So, I mean, we did have these expanded summer offerings during the pandemic from which we've since pulled back. So would that be your point of departure, or are you thinking of something altogether new?
No, it'd be trying to model after what you had during the pandemic, because that sounds like it was really a wonderful, wonderful experience.
Kind of start by trying to get back to that level, and then.
Yeah, but that was, I think, K through 5. I can't remember right now. It was not was it K through 8?
I think it went up beyond 5, didn't it?
It might have. I think it was, I think you're right. I think it was rising first graders to 8th graders, or to rising 9th graders, as I recall.
Yeah, because we had bands.
Yeah, there was the bands. But that wouldn't necessarily address like the thing that's written here, which is like the high school access to.
All right, we have a lot of other people who haven't spoken on this yet, so we'll go to Natalia and then Sarah. Natalia?
Mine isn't on equity, so if that, I don't want to, I can come back to it. It's about the class size guidelines, but if Sarah wants to go first on equity.
All right, go ahead, Sarah.
Thanks, Natalia. So remembering that I don't know anything yet because I'm new to all this, when I see something that says summer programming, am I to understand that that's only people who live in Brookline? Like, do we rely on MECA for busing during the school year, and our numbers wouldn't be such that, or MECO doesn't offer busing in the summer? I don't know how busing works, so can you help me understand that?
We offer a summer program for our METCO students. It's actually our METCO students and our English language learners. It's called Star Academy. So they are here. That's actually our most subscribed, almost oversubscribed summer program that we offer.
And so we already have the busing if we're going to add to programs.
Yeah.
Anyone else on this equity piece?
Can I just ask, do people want to add robust or no?
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
Sorry, Helen's telling me that that's only for a week. Is the summer programming that you're offering for longer than a week?
Star Academy is longer than a week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's 3 or 4?
It's 3.
Yeah.
I believe it's 3 weeks. This summer, just as a caveat while we're talking about summer, we're going to have a slightly smaller window because it's a slightly shorter summer. So that's just
How is
important,
summer
managing
shorter?
expectations.
Oh, we get it later. Okay.
So it sounds like we're going to change D to by no later than FY29 fund robust summer programming. Do we want to have some other sentence in there stating that we are going to begin implementation of that in FY24?
Can we leave the by FY29 just to leave it consistent? Because then we could write all of them by no later
okay.
than, and then say something like, just put an extra sentences, we encourage we encourage progress in earlier fiscal years.
Or implementation to begin in earlier fiscal years, something like that.
Yeah, partial or full implementation.
As resources allow.
Right.
Yeah.
Implementation to begin in earlier fiscal years as resources allow.
Jody, does that work for you? Okay, thank you.
All right, Stephen?
Didn't Natalia have her hand up and she went to the side?
Right, but we were going to just stay on certain themes.
On equity still.
Okay, got it.
So Stephen, is it on the same topic?
Yeah, this is
All right,
still on that topic. What, do we have any related commitment to the accessibility of extended day programming?
So that's already in the strategic plan because it's part of the life of the school policy. And this says fund everything in the life of the, and we have the life of the school policy here, which is aligned with what's in the strategic plan.
In what
at
way
this
is it
point.
currently part of the policy?
It says, because we talked about at the last policy meeting that we were specifically going to be putting in a section on extended day in the life of the school policy.
Right. So
To
it's going to be-
specifically call out the supports needed for extended days as differentiated from other programs.
Right, but what about the budgetary consequences?
This says in 2B,
Oh,
should
I
a
see.
policy on life of the school be adopted that requires funding, identify said funding.
Okay, and What's the, okay, thanks.
All right, Natalia?
Thanks, David. All right, I wanted to understand a little bit. So I agree with the guideline to say that address class size at the high school. What we heard, and Stephen asked for exact numbers, and Hal sort of said 10 more FTEs. Maybe it was between 5 and 10 FTEs. Like, is that a huge change in like would this really constrain, like if really in order to meet this we needed 6 new FTEs to the high school or 7, would that really constrain the budgeting process? Meaning, could there be unintended consequences? They basically have to follow this and therefore cut from other and have like larger class sizes in the K through 8s, or I just don't know if 8 FTEs, or as I'm relatively new, is a huge percentage of the budget, or if it's something that we can play with, or that within the guidelines, it's that, I don't know. Do you understand what I'm asking, Maria?
I do. I would just say one thing and then I'll defer to Linus and Susan. And that's that we don't have this, like, we don't have the extra money, so choices will be made. And so maybe some of those choices have unintended consequences, possibly, or they'll have the intended consequences, which is what we've written down here. There might be other consequences and it's all just a series of choices, but I'm sure they have something else to add to that.
Yeah, I guess I want to understand how big of a choice, like when we're year on year, how much money is really up to choices? And is this like 50% of the choice? Like what percentage would this be if we were saying we'd like you to dedicate at 8 or 6 more FTEs to the high school?
Susan, what was the number for the projection we were talking about earlier, the masters plus 5? Is that 80,000? The projection we were talking about earlier for the masters plus 5, is that about 80,000?
Yeah, it's in that range.
Okay.
Yep.
So if we're talking about 80,000, and you're talking about 8 FTE, that's about $640,000 just as a ballpark. If you're talking about 10, that could be depending on and you're talking about science. So those specialties sometimes, those FTE may cost a little bit more. So you're talking roughly, you can think of a $700,000 to $1 million impact potentially. And so those choices, as Mariah was said, would just have to be looked at in other places as we're going through the venues. I think the other, and I'm not sure if this came up at curriculum, but the notion of the, what do you all call it here, the doubling up, where they can
Teaching 2 classes at the same time?
well, no, the kids can take.
Oh, the 2 AP classes at the
Yeah,
same time, or 2 science classes, or
Yes.
whatever, right?
So, some of those types of choices and impacts as well that directly impact staffing there. So, the complexities of the schedule building process, I don't need to try to articulate those now, but I think your broader question, Natalia, is that it will have impact, but we just have to figure out where that is as we're going through the process. If we're seeing lower enrollment in the K-8s, and through attrition purposes, we can shift that FTE to another spot in the organization. We do those types of things as well. So, and then also this sort of notion of carrying some form of contingency. I know Dr. Gibbons has talked about that also, but that's a set aside in the instance that we get down late, we go through course requests, and then we see a higher demand for something and need to shift resources there as well.
Can I make one comment too? Just, I think implicitly, and you're asking us to say the quiet part out loud, Natalia, we're saying there's going to be larger classes somewhere else in the system, in the K-8s, because we're asking for resources to be shifted, for FTEs to be shifted to the high school. So, where else are they going to come from? They're either in the K-8s or they're at the.
Well, no, we don't know that yet.
Could be
that's part.
administration or something like that.
Say that again?
Could it be administration? Could it be not teaching?
Yeah.
Like, could it be other funds from other buckets? That is what I'm trying to understand, Maria. if it does automatically mean what you said, or could it be cuts in something else, or are the resources really
Unfortunately,
80%
I personally think that, like, we've already cut the central office. We talked about all of this last year I'm glad we're having this conversation. We, last year during the override, we talked about how central office has really been cut way back. And for example, one of the things that we asked to be refunded was another special education director, because the position had been removed and really needed to be returned. Just as one example, but that there was very little in any sort of central office. I think that might have been the only one, but I can't remember all the details. But I guess I just think that when I look at the enrollment that's happening, and we see that if we know that we don't have a lot of extra wiggle room outside of the schools, and we see the high schools growing tremendously, and you can even look last year to this year and see that there is, you know, a slight reduction. So again, it's going to depend on what's in this enrollment forecast. We should be working off of the enrollment forecast that'll be coming in. But if that's what we're seeing, then we should be, in my opinion, we should be looking at how we shift teaching resources from K-8s to the high school.
For purposes, though, of the budget guidelines, I don't think we need to get that deep in detail.
No, it's not written there, right?
Exactly. But 1A addresses this, and as it's written now, it's essentially saying that we're going to ensure that high school classes are closer to recent historical trends with fewer larger classes. We'll leverage enrollment forecasts to identify where positions can be shifted. And that covers it in a way that's flexible, that's not necessarily pinpointing any one specific bucket. We're never going to realistically be able to do that for guidelines that are looking at a 5-year snapshot. And so having that flexibility, I think, is important. So while this is certainly an interesting and an important discussion to have in the context of these budget guidelines, I don't think that it's critical in terms of this document. It's obviously an important topic. Suzanne?
Yeah, I just want to say that a lot of this started to come up in curriculum, and curriculum would love to have a joint meeting with finance. I haven't hit you with that yet, but that's.
Well, but we were going to do one anyways about summer programming.
I just did.
I know.
I know. I just,
But we were going to
I
do
don't
one
want you to
anyways about
surprise us.
summer programming, so this is a chance to do a double topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we do want to discuss with finance.
Sounds
our
great.
thoughts. Yeah.
All right, are there any other suggested modifications to the budget guidelines?
I just have one more question. What is 3C?
What is 3C?
What is 3C?
That was what Helen was asking about earlier. Until this past year, there used to be a reserve fund for cases where additional staff, say it's late in the year and all of a sudden 10 more students have enrolled and they need to open up a new section in a school. There was a pool of funds held aside.
What's the difference between that and a contingency fund that Dr. Guillory was referring to previously?
That's the contingency fund.
So-
But last year, during the override, it got removed. We did, as part to minimize what was going on, it got removed for 1 year, and we think that we probably didn't want to do that, so we're talking about building it back up
It
again.
got removed or it got exhausted? Are you on?
Removed. I'm on. Removed.
Sorry, Dr. Guillory, I thought you said when we were talking about class sizes in your presentation that the contingency was exhausted. We didn't have one. Boy, do I support that. Okay,
You support 3C?
I support 3C,
Okay, good.
yeah.
When we built this budget, we didn't have it.
Okay, I get it. So between 3C and 1A, those are two new tools to address class sizes.
They are, but also they require choices
Funding.
to be made, right?
Yeah, it's zero sum, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, 3C isn't, yeah, I get it.
Anyone else? All right, then I would like to move that we adopt the FY 25-29 budget guidelines with the amended language to section 2D, which adds the word robust to fund summer programming and adds a last sentence, implementation to begin in earlier fiscal years as resources allow. Is there a second? Thank you, Mariah. Stephen, your vote?
Yes.
Mariah?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Andy?
Yes.
Helen?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Natalia?
Yes.
Valerie?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, very good.
Can I just say thank you
Sure.
to Mariah and to the Finance Committee and Dr. Givens, because this is pretty clear and it's really helpful.
That's great. I just want to say, I mean, thank you obviously to Jody and to Susan and also to Lisa, who I don't think is on, but I'm not sure, who was also really, I mean, we've had a lot of contribution here. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so we will now move on to subcommittee and liaison reports. Helen, capital improvements?
Yeah, thank you. The Pierce School Building Committee met on yesterday. I was going to say on Wednesday, but it was just yesterday. We, on the website, I said, I know that. I'm aware. Thank you. We went over some of the documents that are now up on the website. I mean, they're really very specific documents of plans and everything that's been, I think it's over 1,000 pages, been submitted to the cost estimators. There will be 3 cost estimators going over these plans, and in January, the 3 will they'll have it done by, I think, middle of December sometime, and then by January, they will have reconciled their numbers, because obviously sometimes people make assumptions that others don't, so sometimes their numbers are incorrect. There'll be that's what they usually do. And also in January, there's a the Pierce School Building Committee will be meeting again on the 11th of January to discuss all the sustainability issues within the school, from lighting to the geothermal to the heating system, et cetera. So it might be a very interesting meeting if people want to attend. It's obviously open to the public from 4 to 5:36. This one will probably go till 6. So that's Pierce School. Obviously, Driscoll School, we know there's the opening on Monday, and the Capital Subcommittee will be meeting on the 5th, next Tuesday, and discussing the CIP and a few other things. The agenda's posted. Okay, that's it for capital.
And to add to that,
That I know.
well, I think that probably after the cost estimates on Pierce come back in January, there'll be a presentation to the school committee of
Oh, thank you.
the design
Thank
as
you.
it stands.
Yes, definitely. And towards the end of January, there'll be a presentation with all the drawings and the cost estimates, et cetera. And I think, as people probably know, the timeline, it goes as follows. The drawings for the early package will be finished sometime in December, go out for bidding, bidding in January, be back by March. And if those come in within budget, we will do an early package. Beginning in July, the school will move out in June. And that's sort of hopefully the plan as it will go forward.
So is that now, I've lost the thread of the drama of move out. So
Yes, I know.
I'm sorry. So is
It's
that,
okay.
is that now firm, or is it still
Yeah,
TBD,
so
the
originally,
July?
no, I think what you're recollecting possibly is that we were going to try and move out in February
Yeah,
of this year.
I knew that.
And
right.
as, you know, what happened was things got pushed back in the summer, last
Right.
summer, with the getting the contract signed, et cetera. So that put us back some time. It would have been May. It didn't make sense to move kids out in May. And what the staff at the school, Jamie especially, felt is you can, do one move out that's in the middle of the year, or move in.
Mhm.
And so this way we can plan when we move out, moving in, as we saw.
But I thought there
Driscoll
was,
can
there
move
was
around.
something about the early bid package, which was still in question. about the demo package? I'm sorry, there's like so many details to this. I know I'm not.
Yeah, if
Isn't there
that
an-
doesn't happen,
Okay.
then what I've laid out will change.
And we'll only know that in March?
Correct.
Okay, so that's.
Like this, the middle of March.
Okay, so the building commission
We'll
takes
have
a
those.
vote in March
they'll
that will
take a vote,
determine whether or not
yes.
July happens. Okay,
Exactly.
thank you.
All right,
Sorry if I wasn't being clear.
No, you were.
It's okay.
Suzanne,
It's
curriculum?
complicated. It's a
Yeah, we-
huge project.
We met on Tuesday, the curriculum committee met, subcommittee. We had a robust discussion on two topics. One was the review of the strategic plan. So it was a long conversation and we gave lots of input and Jody did a great job incorporating that and then sharing that with us. So I don't need to go through all that because that's all in the plan that we saw tonight. And then the second topic was the class size at the high school. Again, it was a robust conversation. There's lots to be said about that. Essentially, there are 90 more students this year at the high school, and they are down about 2.7 FTEs for a number of reasons. And they made some decisions about where staff should be, how large classes should be. Just to give a ballpark, the college prep classes are typically 20 to 23 students. Honors are typically 24 to 26. And AP classes are typically 26 to 28 students. And this year, they have 22 classes out of 780 classes that are over 30 students. So that's a much higher number than we've had in the past. So that's the conversation we've had. We're going to continue that conversation. And as I just sprang on Mariah, we hope to have that with finance. Dr. Givens was there as well and helped us out thinking about, how do we make contingency plans to get those class sizes down to where we've had historically. So that's summarizing an hour of discussion, but yeah, right.
I just have one question. I remember when we talked about this, and I haven't watched the recording yet. I have it. Betsy sent it. But we talked about also not just looking at the largest classes, but also asking for data on the average or even the median class size. So did you get that data as well?
So we did get some of that. So they said that there are 10 classes that are 15 students or below. And I'm not sure there's one median average. I mean,
I don't think we talked about median, like the average class sizes. We looked at the extremes, right?
yeah, that we did more because they're kind of all over the place.
I thought we had the average of 12 students per staff. That was the average.
Well, yeah, so 12 to 15 students means we need an equivalent of 1.0 FTE staff, teacher. Is that what you're talking about, Helen?
No.
Okay, tell me again.
No, if you took the total high school staff and took the total.
Oh, you're
number of
talking about
students,
the ratio.
The ratio, I'm sorry, I used the wrong term, ratio.
Yeah, the ratio.
Is that what you were asking for?
No.
No.
I was asking for the average number. Well, I was asking for both the average and the median number of students. So we didn't get that data.
No, I don't think I have that. Sarah?
This is just a question on wording.
Oh,
I wanted to know, we're not just addressing class size through contingency, right? We're going to address class size separate and then also have contingency. I think you just used the word.
Yes.
there. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So we'll come up with a date and.
Jody, you don't know that data, right? No. Okay. Sorry. Just offering.
Especially at 9:30.
I'm sorry. We'll have to get that to you.
I mean, if it's possible, the most useful form of the data is to have the whole distribution, as we had it for the override.
Exactly. That would be very.
Then you can ask whatever question you want.
Exactly. But I also don't want to tax the system.
But to compute the median, for example, you need the distribution anyway, so it shouldn't be.
Hal said he could give us whatever we wanted, so I think we can get it.
I take the raw data. I take anything. I'm just curious. Yeah.
All right, thank you. So now we will move on to Valerie, diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Yes, we met jointly with policy on November 20th. The DIJ
agenda item was a report on the, or an update anyway, on the status of hiring and retention of staff of color. Claire Galloway Jones indicated that she didn't have a report for us that was due last month, but will be providing that at the December 14th meeting. So look forward to getting that data and reviewing it with you all in the December meeting.
All right, Mariah, finance.
I believe I reported out on our last meeting. Maybe I didn't. No, I didn't because I was away. So we had a meeting at the beginning of the month, and we talked about the budget book structure and one other topic that I'm drawing a blank on right now. Oh, that's right. We did a preliminary enrollment. Thank you. Preliminary enrollment report review. And then we also talked about the budget book structure and looked at how that will be similar to last year and some exciting improvements and some standardizations and sort of looking forward. And it's great to see that if you actually look in the strategic plan, those are also mirrored in the strategic plan of how the budget book will look over the coming years. And our next meeting, I think, is December 20th. And of course, we'll be getting into big budget season. So at least the big public budget season behind the scenes, everyone's working like crazy. So that's my report on finance.
And anything exotic in the accounts?
Oh, well, I was just looking, I was reading the warrant tonight, and I always like to look for, as you say, something interesting. And and I saw fish tanks this week. So, I don't know if they are the trout or some other fish are they the trout for science? Okay. So, but it was exciting to see the fish tanks coming back around. So.
All right. Government relations, Valerie? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sarah.
I just was curious if you were making big changes with the budget book structure or if that was just sort of, okay.
No, I'll say that it's been really great the past couple of years. We have relatively kept things the same, but streamlined or added areas where we either streamlined or added new areas where we hadn't necessarily been able to report. And so it's been exciting to see its evolution. And this is really a next evolution, but not a dramatic shift.
Right, there was some discussion about having the school-based structure be more evident.
You're right, but we did have school-based budgets last year, and the evolution one big evolution is that we are going to be moving dramatically and excitingly towards even more school-based budget. So, for example, last year, a lot of our human resources in particular were listed under teaching and learning when they are actually school-based educators. And so shifting all of that to where it should naturally be in the schools will be more accurate in terms of what's going on in practice. And it will now be in the budget as well.
All right, Valerie, government relations.
No updates since our last meeting.
All right, so as you mentioned, Valerie, DEIJ met jointly with policy on November 20th. The two main substantive agenda items that were policy components were a further discussion and review of a draft on the inclusion and life of the schools policy. An update was provided in terms of certain legal requirements around who is responsible for providing the necessary supports and accommodations for students on IEPs, on 504s, and also for those who are impacted by the IDEA and ADA. And what we learned was essentially that either way, the supports need to be in place. It's somewhat complicated as to who is financially responsible. It depends on the nature of the relationship between the school district and the third-party entity. So if there's significant overlap between the two, then the responsibility falls on the schools. If it's simply a rental relationship, so to take an extreme example, let's say that we're just renting a room on a Saturday to a private chess club, then the responsibility would be on the chess club. If it's a relationship such as what we have with Steps to Success or the Teen Center, then it would be on the schools. Either way, though, as a committee, my sense, or at least a subcommittee, is that we want to ensure that all of our students, including those who are attending out-of-district schools, are full participants in the life of the school activities. And so we want to ensure that they will have full accessibility to programming. And we discussed that in our next draft update, we will essentially leave it to the discretion of the Office of Student Services as to how the financial obligations are worked out. But from our position, we just want to make sure that those supports are in place. So that's going to be the main modification for the next draft. And we are going to have it on our agenda for our next meeting, which will be on December 14th from 5 to 5:50. So it's an abbreviated meeting because it comes right before the full school committee meeting. It's important that we have an opportunity to potentially recommend that draft to the full committee, because ideally we would like to discuss this policy at the full committee meeting that would be commencing an hour after policy starts. Now, our other substantive item, as many of us know, there's a lot of interest in the potential of having a definition on anti-Semitism. So that was docketed for discussion. There were many people who participated in the discussion, many who provided public comment. Opinions were all across the spectrum, but what I would say that was quite united, and we also heard this tonight in public comment, people want to make sure that we have supports in place for our students and that no one feels victimized by hate speech more broadly. So my sense from that discussion and from comments we heard from subcommittee members and others is that rather than focusing on any particular definition for one particular group of people, we're going to look more at what are the supports we can provide to safeguard against hate speech and manifestations of hatred more broadly. So that was basically policy. Any questions?
David, when will you be circulating the next draft of the life of the school policy? Because of my recollection of what it was going to look like doesn't necessarily align with what you said.
Well, so I'll add, there was also mention about explicitly referring to extended day programs and that there would be supports provided for students in those, so that there will be specific examples provided, because it can be a little bit confusing, the legality part about who has what obligation. And so to the extent that by providing some specific examples, but making it clear that these are not exhaustive examples, that will help make it clear to those in the public who are looking at the policy, oh, okay, so this program would be covered. Is that what you were referring to?
Kind of.
Okay.
When is there a chance?
I expect that sometime this weekend.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Has there been a conversation with Extended Day about this?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sure.
Can I give an update from the?
Yes, absolutely. All right, so go ahead.
Just a quick update from the Climate and Sustainability Task Force. We're going to have a coordination meeting of the 4 subgroup chairs on Friday, December 8th, I think at 4 p.m. So we're going to notice that meeting and the public will be invited to attend. So people will have a chance to hear about how the first of the 3 tasks, which is taking an inventory of the town on assets relating to climate and sustainability in education in the town. They'll find out how that's going.
All right, are there any other liaison updates? Any new business? Seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Mariah.
I'm sorry. I have a question on something that was said earlier at public comment, which was about the state, I think it was the state advisory, or I don't know what agency it was, DESE advisory, and that implied that schools were responsible for social media monitoring.
So I think what was being referred to as an attorney general advisory opinion, and that's certainly something that I think is very worth looking at.
I'm just curious to the extent that that represents an unfunded mandate on schools to be somehow overseeing social media
So the
as opposed to social media being reported or something
right,
like
the
that.
language was when it impacts the climate in the school. Like, so it's like, it's not that the schools have to be watching the social media, but when that that makes a hostile environment for the kids in the school.
Mm.
And I looked at our policy, and it didn't feel like there was a huge gap between the two, but I'll look again.
Okay.
Could somebody who has a copy of the AG's opinion share that with the committee? Right.
I'll send it around.
Okay.
Any other new business? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Recording stopped.